Today, we're going to be diving into human trafficking, sexual abuse, and childhood trauma. I don't need to tell you, it's a fucking heavy topics, so all the warnings on the front end. But I feel like this is an extremely important conversation to have because there's a lot of misconceptions around these topics, and people don't realize not only how prevalent it is all around them, but truly what the downstream effects are for these individuals, their families, and their communities. Um, so we're going to be diving into it today with our guest, Amanda Catarzi. Amanda is a speaker, strategist, MMA fighter, and sex trafficking survivor. After escaping her trafficker, Amanda dedicated over 10 years fighting sex trafficking. In her journey, she counseled the New Zealand government, wrote federal legislation, and went undercover to expose trafficking rings. Currently, she's the owner of Inkery Co, a copywriting agency where she and her team are passionate about helping people find their voice and using it effectively to make positive change in the world. Some of the topics that we dove into are the misconceptions about sex trafficking, childhood abuse within the family and church, growing up in a cult, the impact of traumatic brain injury and PTSD, grief and postpartum depression, domestic violence, post-traumatic growth, her experiences with working with sexually abused and trafficked children, and her journey as an entrepreneur and putting herself out there as a content creator, and lots more. So all that said, I bring you the great, resilient, and extremely powerful Amanda Catarzi. What are like the biggest misconceptions, I guess, people have on sex trafficking? Because like one of my clients many years ago was Just Ask, which was the Fairfax County, Virginia anti-sex trafficking task force, and there was a lot. Like they saw a lot of stuff, and there was just a lot of the conception that this only happens in like really sketchy areas or this and
Mhm.
that or whatever. And it's just like, no, one of the biggest that they were seeing is, people being abducted outside of like nice malls and stuff like that. Like it's what are some of the bigger like misconceptions that you've seen?
That it doesn't happen in America is the first
Yeah.
hardest thing to convince people of. That it's actually a massive industry. Like American men, women, and children being bought and sold for sex is insanely common
Yeah.
here. Um, and that it's not all like kidnappings and taken scenario. It's a lot of abusive relationships that turn from, domestic abuse into trafficking, or even children being trafficking online, having no idea that they're actually being sex trafficked. They just thought they were sending a titty pic to their Justin Bieber looking boyfriend when it's
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
some grungy dude selling their pic on the black market or on the dark web as child pornography. So
Yeah.
um, I think people don't realize how close it is to home.
Yeah. What was your story? Like you said you grew up in an Italian circus family and in a cult, and I'm like, I want to know about that. That's like,
Yeah.
I feel like that could be like the start of some crazy like dark comedy movie, but then there's the other side of it where it gets really dark really fast. So, yeah, what was
Sure.
that? What was that like?
Yeah. My family came from Italy. They were brought over by the Ringling Brothers in
Okay.
Barnum and Bailey Circus. So they were brought over by them from Italy to Sarasota, Florida. That's the winter quarters. That was the
Mm,
winter quarters for the circus. So that's how my family got from Italy to Florida to America. And then my parents met in the circus. So they were both in the circus Italian families that met.
what brought
And
them to the circus?
my dad grew up in it, so he
Oh,
was
okay.
multiple generations in. And then mom in our town, because it is a circus town, if you want to play football, you can play football, or you can join the circus program.
Mm,
And so they train kids in high school and they put on shows on a regular basis. And then if you want to go to USF and go into their circus, you can. And then from there, you get basically Disney comes and takes a look at you to see, and all the theme parks surrounding come in and kind of headhunt for new actors and new acrobats for their shows. So it's actually a pretty big industry here. It's kind of
huh.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just you didn't think of. I've been through Sarasota a few times. I didn't think, oh, this is where the circus is. I guess just that's super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so
So
dad
they
saw her cross the ring, as the story goes, and he was on the tightrope, and she did the web, where the women hang from the ropes and fall down, and he fell
yeah.
in love. And so then they wanted a lifestyle completely different than theirs for us, for my
Mm.
brother and I. So, they
Why
found
was that?
God.
What?
Because I mean, their upbringing wasn't that great.
Yeah.
Um, it was like my dad's family's insanely abusive, alcoholics, rageaholics as well. Very rough people. And then my mom was being raised by a single mother, and her dad was an alcoholic. So there's the whole drug, sex, rock and roll kind of feel to it. So they were trying to do better. So cheers to them, for
Yeah.
trying.
Yeah.
Um,
How much of that is you think is the specific kind of area that they grew up in versus just the industry as a whole? Is it a little bit of A, a little bit of B, or
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, dad was on the
yeah,
road quite a bit. As a child, he was always on the road. And he hasn't really come to grips with how dysfunctional his family is, unfortunately. Like, I've broken all of my uncle's noses for
damn.
touching me inappropriately. Their relation to women is like a highly sexual one. So when they're around females that are their family, they don't know how to treat them any different other than a sex object.
Jesus.
Um, which is very true in a lot of Italian, Latin cultures. It's like women are highly sexualized, and so they don't know how to express love any other way than inappropriately.
Wow.
um,
Do you see that
so
changing? Like, have you
no.
noticed a change, or are you so kind of removed from it that you're not sure?
I made the decision to not be around those dysfunctional family members just because I wanted to have a nice Christmas without someone trying to take off my bra other than my husband.
Yeah.
But I mean, old habits die hard, and especially the Italian familia ties. Like, we broke
Yeah.
tradition in the first hundreds of years this Christmas by not showing up to Christmas Eve dinner. Uh, so that was a choice we had to make, and it was super sad. But
Yeah. How are you processing that?
it was hard in the moment for sure, and it was really sad that we couldn't keep tradition without the dysfunction.
Yeah.
They wouldn't allow us to separate it.
Huh.
So now it's kind of looking forward and saying, okay, well, what traditions do I want to hold for if I ever get to have a family? Or what was the whole point of all those traditions anyways?
Yeah.
So
Is tradition something that you feel like um legitimately matters to you, or is it something that seems conditioned that is like kind of an expectation?
it's both, right? There's some traditions that are just insanely outdated as far as like having the men sit at the head of the table and the women are running around preparing, which I fall into very normal, like old school gender roles just naturally. Like, and I like making dinner for my husband every night. Like, I
Yeah.
enjoy that. Um, but the toxic stuff, I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question. But I mean, so we make cappelletti, which is means little hat in Italian. So we make this cappelletti. We all make it from scratch. We all get together, sit around, and fold these individual pieces of cappelletti for Christmas Eve dinner. So I was a part of that, done that my whole life. That's super normal. And I still did that. No uncles were involved. But we didn't get to eat any of it because the uncles were there. Um,
Mm,
so know how to make pasta from scratch. And the whole thing is to sit around as a family and do something together. So I can do that without the dysfunctional members. Um,
yeah.
so I don't feel like any of the real meat or the real reason of it was lost. It was more of, let's try to shake the dysfunctional parts off.
Yeah, it seems like this is like a larger cultural issue. I mean, I'm here in the Rust Belt in Dayton, Ohio, and like opioid epidemic is a
Mm,
really big deal. And
yeah.
so like I'm kind of I also like I spent like I said when we before we started recording, like I spent 2 years traveling the country, and I was down in Florida. I was all over the place, and I got to see a lot. Particularly, I went to a lot of rural towns, and I got
Mhm.
to kind of see what that was like and talk with people there. Some people are, they like the area, and they fit in with the culture. There's other people that were kind of like the weirdos like me, and they're like, I can't wait to get out of here. Or, I feel like I'm here because I'm taking care of family that are sick, but it's
Mhm.
very, I feel like I'm suffocating. And it just seems like w- family and tradition and all that used to be such a big part of the human condition, and now there's this very hard divide that is being created, where people like you are just like, this is toxic as shit, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. But out of that, you're kind of almost like on an island a little bit, and you're
Mhm.
lacking that community. And if it's a toxic community, then whatever. But there
Still
are
community.
positive. Yeah, there are
Yeah.
community, and, people are increasingly, I'm not a religious person, but I can definitely see benefits of having, going to church and having that community and having all that like every week, and not
Mhm.
having something like that anymore. There's definitely a vacuum there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it's got to be hard. I mean, my family is very small. Like, a lot of people die, but also just a lot of people are very toxic that I don't talk to anymore. So it's
Yeah.
I have to imagine that's difficult. Like, have you
Yeah.
completely severed like most of your family, or are there still people that you talk with?
Oh, no, I hang out with my mom and dad, like, every day, basically,
Okay.
they're some of my best friends, and then my grandmother on my mom's side, she's a crazy cool lady, and I've got tons of cousins everywhere, so,
Yeah.
um, there's good ones and there's bad ones, and so I hang around the good ones, but I definitely felt suffocated by the amount of family I had here.
Yeah.
So when I moved away when I was in my 20s, I moved to California and was there for 5 years, and I miss it every single day.
Why
Not
don't you go
California
back?
particularly, but the
Yeah.
woods, the northern culture. People from the north are just seem way nicer, or at least from West Coast north are
Mm,
way nicer, than here in the South. You get a lot of people from New York, snowbirds and whatnot, and they're just ratchet. People are just ratchet
yeah.
here in the South. So,
Yeah. I when I spent a decent amount of time when I was traveling in Florida, and I made a lot of friends,
yeah,
but they were definitely kind of the weirdos. And what was interesting is people would talk with me, and I would meet them, and they're just like, "Wow, you just say what's on your mind, like you're very real." And
yeah,
that was like a positive trait that they weren't really used to. And a
mhm,
lot of people that were younger, that were like in St. Petersburg and Tampa, where I spent most of my time, they're like, there's just a lot of fake people, thinking like always looking to external factors,
yeah,
like, having a good body, or,
yep,
being successful or whatever, but personally very, they would hide all that. They would hide what they really felt. And I don't know, that's just again, coming from the Rust Belt, where people just kind of say whatever the fuck they think, for better or for worse.
yeah, yeah,
It's a mixed bag, but I'll take that over the
yeah,
thing. I like the South, but there definitely is that kind of, Southern, kind of fake hospitality, kind of
yeah.
niceness.
Bless your
So I don't know.
darling heart really means
Yeah,
fuck you.
yeah. Yeah, I remember when I first started going down there, I'm like, "Oh, everyone's so nice," and then within a day or 2, I'm like, "Oh, no, they're totally talking shit about me," but I
Yep.
just didn't pick up on it. So why do you stay? Like, why do you stay?
Now that I'm older, trying to start a family and trying to have kids, and it's a great place to raise your kids as far as tropical paradise. You got the beaches, and like all of my family is here. The
Yeah.
rest of my family is in Italy,
Mm,
so um like I love my parents, but I mean honestly, if I was single, I'd probably be in like Washington or Reading
mm,
or something in the middle of the woods in a cabin, total hermit
yeah.
lifestyle.
So,
um,
is your husband, like, is he really like being in that area?
yes. Yeah,
Okay,
he loves
yeah.
fishing. And he's from South Africa originally. So it's like crazy to him that we can live so close to the water and fish and
Mm,
um it's, it's good. I'm definitely super blessed. It's tropical paradise and I can run to the beach from my house. So,
It's
um,
pretty nice.
yeah, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
sure everyone's like, this stupid girl
I
with
am
her.
literally looking at snow outside my
Yeah.
window right now.
Yeah. And it was
Yeah.
cold today, which means it was 68 degrees. Uh, so that was cold for me. I had to turn on the heater for my seats.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, I like it up here, but, yeah, every once in a while, I'm just like, "Yeah, I should go south. I should go south," but,
Well, that's the cool thing.
uh
You can always travel. It's a good place to come home to.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean,
So,
that's why ultimately I didn't think I would come back here to Ohio. I like Ohio. I've always liked Ohio, but I really thought, Austin or New Orleans. I almost moved to New Orleans.
mm,
Met my fiance there, and I fell in love with New Orleans. I thought I would stay there, or Seattle or Portland or something like that. I don't
yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
no, I don't say after traveling, I really, friends and family was a big part of it, but also just I don't know. There's a certain I think it's just that kind of Rust Belt mentality that I really like being around here. It's also cheap as shit, cheap as
Mhm.
fucking shit. So that's benefit
Well,
as well.
shit. Maybe I'll come
But
move there. My husband dies. I'll move to Ohio.
honestly, man, Ohio is super underrated, man. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like one of those jokes, like, oh, I went to go visit my family in Ohio, and
Mhm.
but it's actually pretty fucking dope. I mean, I think most people that come here, they go to like Columbus, and
Yeah.
Columbus is bland and boring.
Oh, okay.
It's really bland and boring. It's not like Columbus is very, very different from Cleveland or Dayton or Cincinnati or any of that stuff. It's very, very different. It's
Interesting.
kind of a bland town. I don't know.
All I know
Sorry
is
for
like the
people that are
emo. What's the emo song? Ohio is for lovers. There's like some emo band that has a song called Ohio is for lovers.
I don't
So,
know. It's but
in
yeah, so
Hawthorne
like I'm
Heights.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We got a lot of really interesting bands around here. And also like Dave Chappelle lives like 15 minutes away.
Oh,
So yeah, he does a
interesting.
lot of really cool events and stuff like that. That's pretty fun. He's opening a comedy club here, which I think is
That's
going to be
cool.
really fucking interesting because he's going to be bringing some interesting people in.
For
But
sure.
so I'm curious before we get too sidetracked. You said something about I'm ADHD as fuck, so like I'm prone to going down rabbit holes. But you said that like your dad in particular like hasn't really kind of accepted like how toxic perhaps some of his family is, and like I understand that.
Mhm,
I've got some close friends that have that situation, and it's really hard. Like they like their parents,
mhm.
but their parents have put up with and condoned a lot of really fucked up shit. And they have a hard time wrestling with maintaining a relationship with their parents and then also kind of horizontally being keeping up to date, like constantly getting updates on or feeling like their parents are actively involved with people that are really toxic on the uh the more charitable side, less toxic, on the
Mhm,
pretty nefarious side, quite abusive.
mhm.
So I mean, how is that like for you, like wrestling with that?
I mean, it's our only place of contention. We've
Yeah.
come pretty far in our relationship, my dad and I. Um, and me drawing this line in the sand this holidays was really difficult for him because he is super religious and it's his religious duty to forgive and to love. And so he has that twisted view of religion. And I'm like,
Mm,
cool. Well, how does loving your daughter and protecting her
yeah.
factor into your charitable deeds that you're inviting this sexual predator over for
Yeah.
dinner? Like, well, okay. Um,
There's some pretty strong cognitive dissonance there.
yeah, but the mind's crazy in that it's so damn protective of us and it'll do anything at all costs to protect the human body it's attached to. So cognitive
Yeah.
dissonance is one of them, disassociation. And I just think he wouldn't survive wrapping his head around that maybe that's who his family is because
Mm,
he's sacrificed so much for the family and for these people. that to wrap his mind around how they've misused his generosity is probably too much for him to cope with. So we just have really strong boundaries. And I just recognize that, he's 60 years old and it's probably not going to change. And so we just have some really great boundaries in place. And it's not like I hate dad. It's, hey, if you choose to invite this person over, you're choosing to not have me over. And that's
Yeah.
okay. That I'm just letting you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to fight about it. It's not a fight. I'm not trying to be mean. This is just the way it is. So, and
Yeah.
he definitely is not used to having conversations like that or taking responsibility for the consequences of his actions in that kind of realm, in that kind of situation. So that was super new language for them when I started setting up boundaries and being like, okay, I'm going to do this. You can do what you need to do because they weren't used to me having a voice or the way we were brought up in the cult, like women didn't have opinions or any say in any of that stuff. So when I started exercising that, it was like they would freak out on me. So
Yeah, I
we've come a
imagine.
long way.
So I wanna kinda, because I wanna circle back onto this, but for a little bit of context, so what was kinda your earliest memories? Like, it's like, growing up in a circus family, but they also don't at what point did they decide that they didn't want you to have that lifestyle? Was that something like as they were having a kid, they were deciding like, "Hey, we don't want
Yeah.
this," or was that later?
It was pretty early on. So I was
Okay,
like born and raised in this cult. My
okay.
earliest memory is rage. Like that's the earliest thing I can remember is just feeling intense rage and who knows why, but that's
Ho
is what it is. So
how did they get involved in the cult? Was that directly related to the circus that or what?
yeah, so they wanted to raise us differently. So they found God and then they decided they were going to homeschool my brother and I back in the day when it wasn't cool to homeschool and there were like
Yeah,
no
yeah,
resources at all. This cult goes, hey, we have an entire curriculum for you to use to homeschool your children. We condone it. We love it. We love the
yeah,
Bible. We love hardcore old school religious theology. And we love controlling people like crazy. So, like, it was a no-brainer for them. It was a really attractive offer to them, having no
sure.
idea how to raise kids, obviously being probably scared maybe, and wanting so badly to give us something better. But when you act in fear over something you love, it creates dysfunction because 'cause they're opposites,
Yeah.
and then that's when it all just went sideways.
Yeah,
So
that's gotta be a lot. It's interesting how like a lot of these cults use these kind of like backdoor,
mhm,
like these little like kind of backdoor little ways of getting you in, and they always it always seems like benign, and then
yeah.
it just slowly starts to turn. So did you have any insight into at what point it started getting more nefarious?
Well, I mean, I didn't realize it until I was out of it, like, how messed up my not my parents were great, but, like, how messed up the ideologies that were being planted into me were just so insanely dysfunctional. So, if I don't wanna go into the whole cult thing, I just tell people that I was raised Amish, in
Mm,
order for them to kind of wrap their heads around it. So, I mean, no music, only hymns and classical music, no TV. I wasn't allowed to wear pants as a woman. I was only allowed to wear skirts or dresses, nothing on my shirt because I would be causing men to look at my boobs and therefore causing them to sin, which would be my fault. Um, no makeup, my hair had to
oh,
be, like, down to my shoulders. Well,
yeah.
actually, Clinique makeup was the approved brand of makeup we were allowed to wear, but not too much eyeliner because that makes us look like a harlot.
Why
Um,
Clinique?
I don't know, but it's
Just
expensive.
somebody just arbitrarily was like, "Yeah, well, you know what? We're gonna form a partnership with Clinique."
I don't
Like we
yeah,
like them. Yeah,
Jesus Christ, I don't even know, dude. Like, it was just, like, random stuff, but then that was, like, law. And the
yeah,
goal of the cult is to repopulate the earth with God's children. So you have as many children as possible. So the Duggar family, if you're aware of them, the
Yeah,
19 and
yeah.
counting, who Josh Duggar was just found on like a gazillion counts of horrible child porn, like some of the worst these officers have ever seen. Um, yeah, that guy. So those people were like one of the celebrity families basically in this group
That's
in
that's a great
ATI.
idol.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah,
yeah.
the ideologies of like I grew up believing that I was to get married as soon as possible and start popping out babies as soon as possible. And I was taught
What was
never
the
to say
expectation? Like
what.
like age-wise? Like,
Well, at 13 you become an adult. And so there's a whole ceremony there. And so I have a ruby necklace because women, in Proverbs 31, it says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies." So the girls get little ruby necklaces given to them. And then you start the courting process, which is quite an extensive process. So it's not like people are getting married at 13, but you are being courted by adult males that your father is choosing at that point. And
how
that's
old are these guys typically?
anywhere from 16 on up. Um,
Jesus.
but they need to have a business or really great income and a house and no debt, and they need to be able to provide for you and all 20 of your kids. So there's a lot of pressure on them, like that way. And then it was this huge, so we weren't allowed to date. You had to be constantly chaperoned. So you never really got to know any of these people. But like I was sent to a house. And they had 13 children at the time. And I was basically cooking and cleaning, and they were seeing if my countenance was bright during all the cooking and cleaning. And I did not, I mean, I was a sassy little motherfucker, and I did not pass the test. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, like you're going to do this. And like, I'm not your slave. And so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
brought a
yeah.
lot of like dishonor on the family.
Where do you think that sassiness came from? Because if you grew up into this and that's your conditioning, like it makes
Yeah.
total sense when you're saying like, "Hey, I didn't know how bad this was
Hmm.
until after I got out." Because I mean, literally, if you think about it, that is your entire worldview.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
is literally everything that you know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the expectations and everything are completely around that. I remember that M. Night Shyamalan movie,
The village.
The Village. Yeah, where it's just like they literally think that
Yep.
that reality, and they go out and there's a freeway, and they're like, wait, what the
Yeah.
fuck? Like, I think about that a lot when it comes to cults, propaganda,
Mhm.
whatever. I've done many episodes on propaganda, and I find it fascinating how much our reality can just be constructed.
Yeah.
So like it makes total sense to me that you're like, wow, I this was normalized. This is, I even if you don't like it, you're like, this is
Yeah.
expectations. But then you have that rebellious side of you, that
Yeah.
sassiness. Like, where do you think that came from?
Well, they told me it came from the devil, and that it was a rebellious spirit that was possessing me. That's what I was
Uh,
taught to believe.
jeez.
But I was just
Yeah.
like super curious, and I was pretty obnoxious growing up. Like I was the bully of the
Yeah.
neighborhood. And I like wouldn't let anybody tell me I can't do nothing. I was constantly getting in trouble. And my parents use spanking, and they hardcore condone that, which is whatever. I don't really give a fuck about it. But for me, it did not work. It just made my resolve that much stronger. So we actually had a sheet for how many swats you would get per sin or whatever. And I would literally go look at that, and I would figure out how much I wanted to spend that day in my mind, like
Yeah.
how many
Yeah.
times I could get hit that day and be okay with it. And I would
Wow.
literally like plan my shit that I would do. So my parents literally thought I was demon possessed. That they even took me to the pediatrician, and they're like, "She's demon possessed. Like we don't know what to do with her," because I'd had
Who
these
the
horrible
fuck is this
seizures.
pediatrician?
Yeah, his name's Dr. Shamsey. He's still a practicing pediatrician. Fuck him. He told them to lock me in my bedroom and turn around the doorknob and lock me in there. So I got locked in my bedroom
Wow.
quite a bit.
Yeah,
And then
that's
as I got older, this is as a baby. And then as I got older, there was like forced fasting. So basically, they just wouldn't feed you.
yeah.
And corporal punishment. Um, yeah, it didn't work. I don't know. There was
Yeah,
just something
clearly.
in me that was
Yeah.
like, fuck this.
So, uh,
Yeah.
all right, so you're growing up and they're
Mhm.
doing this homeschooling stuff, and then you start getting involved. Like, what was that community like? Because like it sounds like it's not everyone growing up on some settlement or something like the
Mhm.
village. Like it's more decentralized, where it's just people that live around, using an example like Sarasota or whatever, and
Yeah.
then they all do whatever. So it's like you are kind of exposed to the outside world a little
Mhm.
bit. So
Yeah.
that's that in some ways, like, makes it easier, I guess, to branch off, but it makes it more confusing. I have
Super
to imagine.
confusing. And I think that's why
Yeah.
there was so much anger and rage in me because I was getting, we go over to Nona's house and everybody's cussing over there and drinking alcohol and like living a good life. And it's like, well, why aren't they dead yet? Like, shouldn't God strike them down? And it was such a
Yeah.
black and white difference of like, okay, you're telling me this, but then now I'm seeing this, like, and we're loving them. Why are we loving them if there's, all this stuff was just at constant odds with me? And so that did bring a lot of confusion. And I think that led to a lot of mental health issues I had later, just because it was almost like living a double life
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
those things. And that again was reflected later in my life as well. Um, but yeah, so the community was we would have these groups that would meet up all over. So we had a far above rugby's group for the girls to meet up and encourage each other to do, to live this lifestyle. And then we had the boys group, so all the men were trained in military kind of fashion. So they had military ranks, there were cadets, and all these different rankings. I don't know all the fucking rankings, but and they had uniforms, and they would go out and do military drills all the time. And then us girls would like sew a quilt, or like make some bread, or can some vegetables. So, and then I even got in trouble once during one of those meetings because we were at some girl's condo. I haven't thought about this in so long. We are at some girl's condo, having one of these meetings, and there were these boys on like the balcony across. And I was like, hi.
Yeah.
And I got my ass beat for that because I was being a promiscuous woman and I had to read all the Bible verses about being a whore in the Bible.
Wow. How old were you at the time?
It's probably like 10.
Man, yeah.
So then
That's
that
kind of, I mean,
sets up in your mind, oh, like, so like it's still difficult for me nowadays as a woman. Like, how do I, in a healthy way, embrace my sexuality? And like,
yeah.
I get panicky if I feel like I like look too pretty or like I default to this, like hoodie
Yeah. Yeah.
and messy bun, like dressing up feels scary and dangerous to me still. There's still something I'm working on, but
Is
yeah,
that external or internal? What I mean by that is like it's this conditioned fear of outside threats, or is it more internal, like you're being judged and you're sinning and all the other stuff, or is it a little bit of both?
it's a little bit of both because like being pretty gets you raped, and then I'm also sinning against God.
Mm,
So it's dangerous and it's violating.
yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
get the fucking double whammy there,
Uh,
because it doesn't even really matter, even if you're in a super safe area where, like, intellectually, like, I'm
yeah.
probably likely not going to have anything happen to me.
Yeah.
But still, then you got the internal, that little voice that's just like,
Yeah.
gotta go to hell. I mean, it's just
No matter
that's
how much training or whatever I've had, yeah, it's always constant. And I remember like
yeah.
dressing up, and I remember one time my mom was like, Amanda, you look beautiful. And I was like, oh, wow, like I haven't heard that, before. And then she's like, you look too beautiful. And then she like
Ah,
messed up my hair, or she changed my hair, or we made me look more frumpy, or whatever. And I remember
yeah,
that, and God bless her heart, she was trying so hard to protect me. And
sure, sure.
like I love my parents, they're freaking amazing. um but yeah, it fucked me up.
It's like, mom, you had a chance, man. You could have hit it out of the park, and then you dropped the fucking ball. Just like, ugh, that's rough. So yeah, at what point did I guess at what point did the abuse happen and then you were conscious that something was off about it? Because it sounds like it was definitely there's like a institutional gaslighting where you
Mm.
were conditioned, and this is just like, you're saying like men don't. There's like this expectation that hey, men are sexual and they're just gonna do this and whatever. So it sounds like it was just kind of conditioned where. But at what point did it? You were like, this is not something's off here.
Yeah. The first time I was sexually abused was actually by some random neighbor. And
Huh.
he molested me and I was 7. But those things playing in the like the stuff that you don't say no to a man. And it's your job to please your husband and never say no to him. Like those things were playing in the back of my mind. Um, and I had a crush on this kid, of course, and he was substantially older than me. So it was like everything that I was conditioned was playing out. And then his
Yeah.
older brother found me like crying in the bathroom of their house and like brought me home. And because I was such a rambunctious, rebellious spirit girl, my dad opens the door and he's like, "What did she do?" And he's like, "Whatever, she probably deserved it." And because I probably everything else, any other situation, that would have been 100%
So
true.
the dude told your
Oh
dad
no,
what
my dad had
happened.
no idea. My
Oh,
dad
okay.
just made that assumption and made that statement. And so then
Jesus.
further cementing this thing in my head of, "Oh, I deserve this."
Yeah.
So that was the first time I was sexually abused. But then in the cult, I did not get sexually abused in the cult just because I was such a black sheep of the whole thing and
They're like,
constantly
"We don't even wanna
rebelling.
fuck with this."
Yeah, but they would put me
Yeah.
I was sent to Indianapolis Training Center, and they, to be, like, reinstitutionalized, and so I was put in the prayer closets, which are little tiny rooms with cots, and they starve the shit out of you, and you're supposed to memorize, like, books of the Bible, and they beat the shit out of you, and yeah, and eventually they gave up on me and kind of was like, "We're done with you people, like, you're not adhering to what we want you to," and basically kinda got my family kicked out of the cult. But
Wow.
we were older at that point. I think I was like 15 and I was about to graduate high school. So we're kind of like done anyways with the curriculum. And I think we're all kind of very disillusioned by the whole thing. So we're kind of like, "Oh, okay, like we're not too mad that we're getting
Yeah.
kicked out." So
What was that when you got sent to Indianapolis, like, what was that like? 'Cause I've been there's a lot of stories of people just being abducted, in the middle of the night and
mhm,
their family condoning it and actually hiring this is the most fucked up thing.
mhm,
The family hiring people to come and abduct their kids.
mhm.
It's like even if you wanna send them, it's like the fucking lack of just I cannot
Tact.
imagine as a father sitting there being like, "Yeah, take my daughter and abduct her in the middle of the night with no fucking context." And it's like, how do you not think that there's going to be a tremendous amount of post-traumatic stress
Yeah, thinking that's a
of
win.
that?
That's a parenting win
Thinking
right
that
there.
that's a win. Oh, it's gonna scare her into it's like,
Okay.
no. It's just like, I don't know. I go back and forth between, like, I feel like there should be a test to be a parent or something, but then
Yeah,
also that, again, me being a propaganda person, I'm like, yeah, that's a
it's a
slippery
slippery
slope. But
slope. Yeah.
it is. So, but it's just like, Jesus fucking Christ. So, like, what was your experience? Like, did they tell you what was happening, or
Yeah,
was it
yeah.
kind of?
I
Did you
knew.
have? So did you have an idea that that was a possibility, or did they just pull the rug out from under you and like, "Yeah, you're gonna do this shit."
No, I have an idea because there was a lot of different trainings that would happen there as a training center. And if you were a good girl or if you were a really bad girl, you would go to the training center. So I wasn't exactly clear on which one I was at that point. I was like, "Oh, I'm going to Indy and it's my first time away from my parents. Like, this could potentially be like,
Yeah.
maybe I'll find my husband."
Yeah, yeah.
Ugh. Um, First time on a plane, everything. So yeah, I went there and I was doing good until they caught me with a Good Charlotte CD that I brought with me. And somebody, I think my friend Amy gave it to me or something. I don't know how I got it, but I like played it in the morning and someone heard the drums and and that and I was I got into an elevator. I'd fucking scrub this floor all night long, basically, for punishment. And I got into an elevator and there was a guy in there. And I rode up the elevator alone with a guy. And that was a huge no no. So those two things put me the prerequisites. So,
So you were doing your job, air
yeah.
quotes, and like you were doing this, and you're like, man, I fucking you could eat off these floors, and you did a great job. And they're like, oh yeah, yeah, a guy just happened to be there, so we're gonna punish you again.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you they really are just conditioning you where you cannot win.
And he didn't get punished. I got
Of
punished.
course, yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
It's always the woman's fault. Yeah, and I'm not like a huge like feminist person or anything like that. Like I said, I adhere to gender roles, like traditional gender roles in my own relationship, and I love it. It's great. I'm fine with it. Whatever, do your thing.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's a conscious choice.
but
You're not having
Lord,
that thrust on you. Yeah,
yeah, it was a
yeah.
lie, and then that all definitely played out later in my life, so I graduated from high school, and then when I turned 20, I just a couple of my friends were at this school in California, this ministry school, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm gonna go, like, and this will be great," and it was awesome. The school was great. I will tell you, I walked into a grocery store, for the first time in my life, had to buy groceries for myself. And I had a total mental breakdown because I had no idea what I liked. Had no idea. Had no grip
Wow.
on, do I like peanut butter or not? Because I was never allowed to figure that out. So I didn't even know what groceries to buy because I had no idea what I liked. And that was like the beginning of, maybe that was messed up. maybe,
Yeah.
maybe it's not normal to,
What is peanut butter?
yeah,
And then you just have a total existential crisis. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
oh
So
God.
to give you like context, like that's how much of a choice I did not have in anything that happened in my life up to that point.
Yeah.
It was pretty earth shattering.
I, I I hate to go back to it, but like I'm just curious. So you had that abuse with your family members.
Mhm.
At what point did that come to light, and what was their reaction? When your parents found out?
Yeah, I told them probably when I came back from California because they're always like, "Why are you so mean to them?" And I'm like,
So this is
"What?"
after you're 20 and you went.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
I've got some tools under my belt now. I know how to talk to
yeah.
people. I know boundaries. And I was like, "Oh, because of A, B, and C." And they're like, "Amanda, come on. Like you're telling stories. You know how." And I wish I could tell this to everyone. Listen, if you get sexually abused to any extent, your family will not believe you. Like, and especially if it's by a family member, like, don't ever assume they're going to believe you because they most likely won't. Again, because they can't wrap their brains around how badly they failed you. Like, that's a hard pill for them to swallow. So, like, whenever I hear someone tell their abuse story and they're like, "And my mom didn't believe me," I'm like, well, of course she didn't. That's, like, a
Yeah,
horrible thing for them to, like, comprehend, that they didn't protect
yeah,
you, that they didn't stop it, that they didn't see something. Like, you're asking them that to swallow this super bitter pill with you. Um, so, yeah, so obviously they just basically gaslighted me in that process. My mom was way more like, "Yeah." She's like, "I get
What
it, but that's our family," kind of thing.
what what was that like to process? I mean, what did you what did you think was going to happen when you were coming back from California and you're like, man, I gotta air some grievances here, and like what were you expecting their reaction to be?
I don't know, like kindness. Uh, like, for
Yeah,
them to finally understand, like, I guess I'd hoped that it would help them understand me better and not be so evil or not be so rebellious or not be so, you know, aggressive. Those are just few of the labels that I've earned. Um, but it didn't. It just built up. I mean, they kind of rejected that, and then that just built up more rage in me. Like,
yeah,
I can go
yeah,
0 to 100 in a second, and it's something that I mean, getting hard and becoming bitter and becoming an angry person is the easiest thing in the fucking world. like
Sure. Yeah.
softening yourself, that is hard work. Like,
Oh,
that's
yeah. I
I
mean,
mean, I've
I
been working
entirely
on it
agree.
for fucking 10 years, man, and it's, like, the hardest work in the world. Um, so, yeah, I mean, it just fed the disillusionment, the bitterness, the anger, and I was living with them at that time. So when I came back from California, this is all after being sex trafficked, labor trafficked, um, and I'm coming back home with a severe brain trauma, and massive amounts of PTSD, massive amounts of head injuries, and I am like raging already. So for them to kind of be like, no, only kind of
Wow.
just would set me off.
Yeah. Well, that adds so much more weight to it that's
Mhm.
when the trafficking you got out of the trafficking situation, then came back.
Mhm.
So, God, it's like the thing that you needed the most was just to be understood and have that support. And
Yeah,
then the gaslit.
yeah.
Fuck. Okay, so you went through the schooling, you basically got kicked out, and then what was the transition to you going to California?
It was a ministry school out in Reading, which is like Harry Potter school for Christians. It's the craziest place in the world. It's called Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry.
Oh,
And
they literally say supernatural.
oh yeah, like
Oh my God.
total charismatic Pentecostal Christianity. So for people who don't know what that is, that's the like people who like hold the snakes, are like speaking in tongues, laying on of
Oh yeah.
hands, like trying to resurrect people, trying to heal the sick, all that stuff. Listen, that was a great experience. As crazy as it sounds, that was a really great opportunity for me to learn about my identity and trying to find myself for the first time in my life. So I felt like I needed that extreme to undo the other extreme.
Well, so
Um,
what was it about that created that space for you? Was it just because it was so batshit insane, you're like, "This something's off here," or
well, it
what
felt
was it?
familiar, right? The
Oh, okay.
craziness, the chaos felt familiar. So just because something is toxic doesn't mean it's gonna feel bad. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people stick with their toxic cycles because it's familiar.
Oh, for
Um,
sure, yeah.
and so I think that's what really drew me in is all the people that showed up to this school were very interesting, multiple layers of trauma, the black sheep of the family, anyways, for their beliefs by being there. And so it felt like a place that I might belong for the first time in my life. I was like, oh, so
Wow.
I'm not rebellious. I'm just ambitious. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not, obnoxious. I'm just bold and brave. So they helped me reframe a lot of things. And it was super helpful for me to undo a lot of the bad ideologies I was taught. Um, and like really, like I believe in God still. And during that whole cult experience, I was like, I just don't think this is the same guy we're talking about. We're not talking about the same guy.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah,
just
yeah,
really don't
yeah.
believe this is God. I think you got it twisted. And so when I went to Bethel, it was like, oh, like that's who he is. And like
Yeah.
he's a good guy and loving and caring and that's who God is. Like I can embrace that God. Um so yeah, it was super healthy for me. I went because a bunch of my friends were going, and it was the rebellious thing to do. I mean, it was the worst thing I could have done at that point to my parents is go to California, which is modern Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a place that is like a super sinful place in the Bible. So they would reference California as Sodom and Gomorrah. And it was God basically wiped it out in the Bible. But anyways, so I went to California and I went to a hyper charismatic Pentecostal place, like direct threat to the theology that I was raised by. So, um, yeah, I'm super grateful for that time for sure. Taught me a lot.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you went to the fucking supernatural, the place, what was the first so you go there, what was the first interaction with somebody else where you're like, "Do you think this is bullshit?" "Yeah, yeah, I think it's bullshit too," and you start opening up. It sounds like you had that interaction where you started kinda correlating people's stories and realizing that you're all victims and this is fucked up. Was there, like, an initial interaction? 'Cause I have to imagine you also probably felt a little nervous about opening up, I guess, or were you not?
There was such a space created for vulnerability there. um, that really felt safe. But
Okay.
I wouldn't know that my upbringing was like so crazy. And I would just be like, oh, yeah, when um, mom and dad were making me fast for a week and blah, blah, blah. And people would be like, and I'd be like, what the
Okay.
fuck? Like, you didn't fast? Like, that wasn't a normal, like, punishment for you? Or they didn't lock you in closets, And then people are like, no, that's child abuse. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, what else are you going to do with a
Yeah.
bad kid? Like, they're like,
Yeah.
not that.
Yeah. But did they have their own equivalent? Like they had their own, because it sounds like what it was
Mhm.
is different flavors of abuse.
No, no,
So,
no. I wouldn't say it was I didn't experience any abusive behavior at Bethel. Um,
no, sorry. What I'm saying is the other people that were saying that what they did to you was child abuse. It sounds like some of them, your peers, also came from abusive
yeah.
backgrounds.
Okay, yeah.
So it's like there's kind of that different flavor of abuse. Like they
Mhm,
locked you in a room and fasted you. That's crazy to them, but to
mhm.
you it's normalized. But were there other things that happened to them that seemed crazy to you but were normal to them?
Sure, yeah, by, like, kicking them out. Like, that was a super weird concept of, like, kicking your kids out of the house. My
Yeah.
parents would never do that, and I always thought that was, like, really dangerous and really, like, horrible to kick
Yeah.
a child out of their house. Corporal punishment was always a normal one. Um, I mean, they were, like, full out, like, get the shit beat out of you, people. I had yet my parents never did that to me. They would spank me pretty hard and all the time, but um
Yeah.
I don't think it was like crazy or anything. Um but yeah, there are people from a lot of different backgrounds. There are other people from cults there. So it was good and bad in the respect that we'd often share like our war stories, of our trauma, which is just a cycling of trauma. And again, that feels super familiar and it feels comforting. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
super careful too about even the podcasts I do, because I don't want to just sit
Yeah.
around and talk about horrible shit. Like I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to like bring education and inspiration. And I like when I worked in safe houses, rescuing women out of trafficking and bringing them into safe houses, they always loved horror movies
Huh.
because it would normalize the abuse that they had experienced. And so it was comforting for them to watch someone being slashed to pieces or, being raped. That felt like better to them because they didn't feel so victimized. So I
Yeah.
think that's like a
Yeah.
super interesting thing that happens in the mind. And so we would work to undo that of like, no, it is really messed up what happened to you,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's not happening to you right now. So you're okay,
It's
Yeah.
hard to digest that though. I mean, the body keeps the score.
Yeah.
Like, you can't untether that,
Mhm.
I mean, your limbic system. I'm dealing with that right now. I've got generalizing anxiety disorder and intellectually I know I have nothing to be concerned about
Sure.
at all. Period. Like my life is great. Um but there's just little things that just trigger a crazy like anxiety response that I'm sitting there as an outside observer in my thoughts. I meditate every day. So what the whole thing with meditating is creating that buffer between, your actions and your thoughts and
Mhm.
yourself. And I do that and I'm observing myself and I'm being like, this is insane. Like, why are you reacting this way? Body, why are you doing this? But like it still does it. So I mean, knowing a tremendous amount of people with PTSD and me having, flavors of it myself, it's like it's hard because you feel like you're insane,
Oh yeah.
but you're not.
Oh yeah.
But you're not. Like, your body is trying to protect you. It's
Yeah.
having these responses, so
Yeah.
it's hard. So yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean I completely agree. I don't like people that just dive into the kind of abuse stories for the sake of it. To me, I always see them as a vehicle for like how
Yeah.
can we learn, because there's a lot of people I've talked to that they're cis white dudes that grew up in upper middle class circumstances and never really had any struggle in their life, and they're you hear stories of various flavors of abuse and they're just like, oh, it's not that bad or whatever. They don't understand,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of what I'm trying to do with this podcast is have people share their stories of whatever it is, whether they're an entrepreneur that's dealing with mental health issues,
Yeah.
or whether they're someone who, has survived suicide, or there's someone like you. It's like, I want people to have a better idea of like how people's experiences shape them, and,
Mhm.
having an idea, have to be more empathetic,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, so you're in California, and you went down with some friends, and that's kind of your like, hey, I'm gonna fucking fuck you, like I'm gonna rebel. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fuck the establishment. So like, you're down there and you're doing that. It sounds like that started off as like a really good thing,
I
you
did.
know?
Yeah, it was great until I graduated from the school because I had kind of a built-in forced, you had to go to certain groups community.
Mm,
So once that was no longer enforced, I was left to myself and I didn't know how to build community. I didn't know how to relate to peers if I wasn't serving or leading. I didn't know just how to have a fucking conversation with anyone.
yeah,
And then I was still pretty messed up in my guy, like their dating roles and stuff are really weird too. So like I was still really messed up in the romantic world. Still had to have like a real boyfriend at that point. And I'm like, I
yeah,
was
yeah.
probably like 25. Like, um,
Wow, yeah. Some
so
boundaries, all that. I mean, yeah,
oh yeah,
there's Jesus,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Because even outside of the context of abuse, I've met some people that just, whether they had severe self-conscious, self-image issues,
Mhm.
or they just grew up in a rural area, whatever. I've met some people that haven't had any sort of serious relationships in their 20s. Man,
It's weird.
it's weird. They have a hard time interfacing, because you've got people that have been dating, middle school, high school,
Yeah.
whatever, and like they're kind of like children in a way.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
it's yeah, I mean, so that's gotta be fucking hard. Like,
Well,
what was your first okay, so anyway, I don't want to jump ahead too much. So you're now there,
yes.
and you're just like, I don't know how to be a people, I
Yes.
don't know how to like
Literally. Yeah.
make friends,
Yeah.
anything. I don't even know what I like. Like, do I like peanut butter? I
No.
don't know. Like, so what was the rest of that kind of journey for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I started working for the church, which was, a mega church, and they had a media company, which is like one of the biggest Christian media companies. Basically, if you ever go to church and they're singing songs, they're singing this this church's music. Like they're the best, and they're
It's
really
just
skilled.
mass manufactured music that they're coming up with.
No, I mean, they're really talented and they really believed in like striving to be the most talented. Because as children of God, you should be connected to God and therefore you should be inspired by God. Therefore, what you create should be the very best and the most excellent. So that's kind of their philosophy with that, which, made them millions. So anyways,
Sure,
I ran their content, their whole content department. So content for all of the ministries, all of the websites, which was massive. So it's
sure,
kind of
yeah,
funny because I'm a content creator now and I run a content
yeah,
agency
yeah,
now. So it's kind of funny how that comes back. But I needed to lose weight. I needed to find something to do at nights because I was getting super depressed just going to work and coming home. And this one guy's like, "Oh, go to this MMA gym with me. Like, I want to go try it out. Come with me." And I'm like, "Okay." So I go to this MMA gym and I like fucking dominate. Like, I'm like really good at punching people.
makes
Shocking.
sense, man. Well, you're rebellious, and you've got that fucking rage
So much
inside you, and you're
rage.
just yeah, and you're like, oh wait,
Yeah.
fuck you, like,
Yeah.
I totally get it.
So I soon earned the name Big Bulls, because I had the biggest balls of anybody in there apparently, and I was like the only girl. And for the first time in my life, I'm running into these people that are highly toxic and highly dysfunctional. God bless them, I love them. But they are just like have everything out for everyone to see as far as their emotional trauma and fuck that bitch. And they're just like say like it is. And I had
Yeah.
never experienced anyone that honest in my life. And I was like, oh
Mm,
my God, like it was amazing to me, even though it was highly dysfunctional, no boundaries. It was the most incredible thing I'd ever witnessed. And, you've got your fight team who's your family. So they very quickly became my family. And I was
yeah.
spending all of my extra time with this new group of people, basically the only girl. And so I just decided telling everybody about my stuff of like, this is how I was raised. Isn't that crazy? And they're like, holy shit, that's awesome. Like I just got out of jail for killing this person and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh,
Yeah, yeah,
cool.
yeah. Just this like
While we're
weird.
barbecuing some burgers and they're all like
Yeah, yeah,
tatted up
yeah,
convicts. And, I'm there. I'm just like, like I just graduated
yeah,
ministry
yeah,
school, super naive. And of course, like when you're broadcasting how naive and fucking dumb you are, predators come.
yeah, yeah,
And so that's how my trafficker found me. He was a boxing coach and he was my boxing coach. And I thought we started dating. He asked me out and I was like, oh my gosh, like my first adult relationship. And he taught me how adult relationships happened, which is total bullshit, of course. And all those old, lessons, all those old
yeah,
ideologies just popped right back into play. And I was sucked up in
yeah,
it real fast.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So how did that start to manifest? Like,
Mhm.
how quickly did that start to occur?
Probably,
Because I imagine he started vetting, like, how much can I get away with,
oh yeah.
kind of, and yeah,
There's
yeah,
definitely a grooming process that always happens in trafficking. But they're willing to do it because they're going to make a lot of money. So it's
yeah,
worth the time and it's worth the presents and the dates and the niceness, because you're going to make a shit ton of money off this person. It's an investment. So yeah, we were,
Is this something sorry to interrupt, is this something that he had done previously, or was this did it just kind of morph into okay, so he had
yeah,
experience?
well, he had two other girls, which I thought were exes. And they were crazy, right? Is what he told
Of
me.
course.
And don't go anywhere
Yeah.
near them. They're fucking crazy. And they're really good fighters too. So they could actually tear me to pieces. Uh, and yeah, he had children with both of them. Um, and I was the new girl on the block. So yeah, he started taking me on dates, and started educating me on how adult relationships should go. So like it would start with like, oh, see that guy over there, he thinks you're really hot. Okay, that's like a weird thing to say to me as my boyfriend. And he's like, oh, it turns me
Yeah.
on that he thinks you're hot.
Hmm.
Okay, like, thanks for
Yeah.
that. And then, one drunken night, he's like, you should totally go blow him. That would totally, like, I would love that. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, I'm not going to do that. Like, it's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And I'm already violating so many of my previous boundaries, just by being in a relationship with this person because he's older. He's not religious. He cusses a lot. He drinks. So, like, this is starting to erode away all my values. And now I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah.
sleeping with him. So I'm having sex with him. First time having consensual sex ever. Again,
Yeah.
eroding away, eroding away. So when he starts to make these suggestions, it's like, you're fucking crazy. But I've already given up so much to that point that he knew it when he could get me there. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then there were just a bunch of drunken nights, where he would put me in dangerous situations, being the only female at the team fight meeting, and now all these guys are insanely drunk, and then I get gang raped because how am I supposed to fight off 6 200-pound drunk guys? Like, that's just not gonna
Yeah.
happen. But, "Oh, I was blacked out drunk, and I don't remember any of that, and I'm so sorry. That will ever happen again. I love you. I got you." Meanwhile, he's getting paid on the side for my gang rape, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
So this
yeah.
is something that he intentionally
Oh yeah,
orchestrated.
he would orchestrate all these accidents. Um,
Yeah.
and I was just dumb enough to just think that he loved me and accidents happen.
So how did you process that? Like, one of those incidents occur, like, you wake up the next day, what do you think happened?
That he got drunk and they got drunk and accidents happen. And I need
Jesus
to be smarter
Christ.
next time. And I need to be, it was my fault because I shouldn't have been in that situation. And I was dumb for that. So then
But
he
he
would,
put you in that situation.
yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
and then there were like guilty stuff. So after a couple rapes, you kind of just start to lose yourself, right? So you start to
Sure.
disassociate pretty hardcore. So then you don't even know. when things are dangerous anymore because you've detached from your emotions so far. So you're like a zombie.
Yeah, yeah,
And so then, um, and things were always in a wave. So with him, things would always really good. He's so in love with me. He's talking about marriage, and then I get gang raped, and he beats the shit
yeah,
out of me. So then it trained me that every time something really bad happened, something really good was about to follow.
yeah.
Again,
Carrot and
all
stick.
all orchestrated by him, but you get chemically addicted to the endorphins and the adrenaline. And
Yeah,
so you stay.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So how long did that go on for?
The abuse about 6 months. So like the sex trafficking and the labor trafficking, because he was also setting up fights for me and managing those fights. But I was fighting like every weekend. Um, Win or lose. So I had massive amounts of concussions on top of concussions on top of concussions.
Jesus
And he was
Christ. Yeah,
managing my fights for me. So he was like taking all my money, my winnings. And I'm like, oh, well, he's training me. He's like, I'm living with him.
yeah,
He's making sure and he's controlling my food, which again is like echoing everything in the cult of he's taking care of me, he's providing for me. So I don't say no. And you can't say no
yeah,
because if I did try saying no and I got raped or I got the living daylights beaten out of me. Um, so yeah, so about 6 months of all that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Have you dealt with CTE because of all those concussions?
I've never actually been like tested specifically for that. But I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, yeah, it's crossed my mind a gazillion times, especially because rage is still such a huge thing that I wrestle with and deal with. So, um,
yeah,
I mean, I know. So how I escaped was through a car accident, and I know they did a scan on me then. They determined that I had severe brain trauma at that point, and I couldn't form sentences. I couldn't finish my sentences. I couldn't understand like how to order a pizza. I couldn't like connect things in my head
yeah,
after
yeah,
that accident. So I don't know. Like I wouldn't be surprised for
yeah,
as much as
yeah.
I got punched in the face.
Yeah, that's gotta be hard. Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Oh, sorry.
Cool. No, you're good. It just helped with the dog
Sorry.
barking. No, you're good. Dude, it fucking happens. So you're in this relationship about 6 months, which I was in a very, very toxic, dramatic relationship for 9 months. It felt like fucking years. So
Yeah.
I imagine for you, it felt
Yeah.
way, way longer. And saying 6 months, like, doesn't have the weight to it
Yeah.
that it truly does. I get that. So you're in this situation for 6 months. What was the catalyst for it like dissolving?
Yeah, it was the car accident, basically. So I was sent to go fight and fuck this guy. His name was Shameless. Like that was his fight name, like ironically. I was like,
Apt at least.
yeah, I was like, okay, something this is this a Hallmark movie or like, it was just like too crazy.
Yeah,
Um And so I went to go fight him, and for whatever reason, I did not want to sleep with him. Like, and I got into my system of like, nope, not doing this. And so I knocked him out, and I knew I was going to pay for that. So I was already kind of like anticipating, I'm going to get the shit beat out of me or whatever. So I knocked him out, and I was like in my car driving away, trying to get away quickly before he like came to again. And somebody ran a light and actually T-boned me and totaled my truck. And there
Jesus.
was a cop behind me, and so he saw the whole thing. And so, sorry, the dog's going crazy. And this is the only time I've ever been knocked out. So
Yeah.
a Canadian in the Cadillac is the only time I've ever been knocked out. Like this and so that explains a lot of the head trauma too, because I was never
Yeah, yeah,
knocked out
yeah,
in a fight. So I'd keep fighting way past when I should. Um,
yeah.
so that I come to and the cops like use jaws of life to open the door. And he's like, "Oh my God, I thought you were dead." Was like the first thing he said to me. And I was like, "Oh no, like I'm fine. I've had so much head trauma at this point that it's normal for me to feel this way." So I'm like, oh no, I'm good. I'm good. He's like, no, you need to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I'm good. And I text my trafficker and I said, hey, I almost got in a car accident, almost died. And he says, is your face fucked up? And I said, no. And he's like, well, you're still
Jesus.
fuckable then. And for
Oh my
whatever
God.
reason, that moment was like, what the fuck am I doing? Um,
Yeah.
and it was like coming out of water. And I was like, holy shit, man. Like I wasn't like, oh, I'm being trafficked. It was like,
Yeah.
this is fucked up. So
Yeah. Let's take a break real quick. Okay, so you got in the car accident and you got this fucking bullshit text like, well, at least you're still fuckable. And then you're just like, this is some fucking bullshit. This is some fucking bullshit.
yeah.
And so what was that process like? Because you've already kind of had in your story so far, you've already had a couple moments where you're like, this is some
You
bullshit.
think I
But
would learn,
now,
right?
well, dude, I mean, it's a son of a bitch. It's a son of a bitch.
It
Like,
is.
it's
It
so
is.
easy. I mean, I've had that happen several times where I've been in really toxic relationships, whether it be friends, romantic, or business partners or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the signs. You know, for me, I'm very susceptible to narcissism. Like, I'm very susceptible to people that are narcissistic. And narcissists are very charming a lot of the times. There's vulnerable narcissists, which are less charming, and then you've got grandiose narcissists, which are very obvious. But they're charismatic and they're cool and whatever, and then they slowly turn over time. And so I'm susceptible to that, and I've had to learn the signs. I've
Mm-hmm.
had to learn all the other stuff over the years. But even still, every once in a while, I find myself being like, that person's really cool. And then
Right.
you start
Wait a
two or
minute.
three, four times, you start interacting, you're like, okay, there's some signs, the facade's starting to crack. And,
Yeah.
you know, 10 years ago, it's like, it would have taken me a year or two to figure this out. Now it's like, okay, I see you. I see you, son of a bitch. And,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of whatever. So it's, yeah, it's not simple. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why I like sharing stories like this, because people don't it's like it's unintentional, but there's a lot of victim blaming.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they don't see how they themselves or their daughter or their son could get themselves in these circumstances.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so
No, it's
yeah,
it's totally some bullshit. Totally. And I totally
yeah,
accept the fact that I was dumb as fuck. Um, but I wasn't really given the handbook on how to I was taught to embrace toxic and controlling men, not run
yeah,
from them. Like it felt
it
yeah,
calcifies.
it felt good to be
It
controlled.
calcifies.
It felt safe to be controlled. Like I even struggle with that now. Like sometimes like if I'm like off, like if I'm not aligned or grounded, I'll like text my husband and give him a rundown of like everything I'm doing every single moment because that was a requirement before. And I like the feeling of being controlled. So I'm kind of like forcing him to control me. Isn't it fucked up?
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
it's almost like a soothing thing to try to
yeah. It's
like
a coping mechanism.
make him control me. And he's like, I don't need a rundown of your day. Like, I love you and I care
Yeah.
about what you're doing, but like, I don't care like where you are or what you're
How do
doing.
you how does it feel when you acknowledge that? Like, how, like, when he responds that way, which is, it's great that he
Yeah.
does, and he's supportive, but at the same time, you're like, ah, fuck, you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
what does that feel like for you?
Ah, got me again. Like,
Yeah,
oh.
yeah,
I mean, no, I know not to like put so much weight on it. It's just like, fuck.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so I just move on. I'm super like now I'm super grateful for all that's happened to me because it's benefited me so much. And people are like, oh my
mm,
God, you benefited from being sex trafficked? Yeah, because I've chosen to make it something that benefits me and not something that holds me back. Um,
yeah,
so it's enabled me to help so many people and helped free so many people. Um, so yeah, yeah,
yeah. No, I understand. I mean, the last episode I released was with Matthew, and he survived suicide,
mm,
and now he's like that saved. Ironically, his suicide attempt saved his life.
hmm, yep,
Like he got lucky that uh, he was able to survive that. But it's that resiliency that I taught him and an
Mhm.
appreciation for life, and now he's able to
Yeah.
help and talk with other people and share that story, and if we save a lot of people. And it's like, I've
Mhm.
gone through nothing as extreme as you two, but still I've gone through very traumatic things that I almost killed myself multiple times.
Yeah.
And it's going to that break, getting to the point of almost breaking, that creates that resiliency
Yeah.
that, for the rest of your life you can build a stronger foundation on.
Mhm.
And it's not something that you would wish upon somebody you love, but
No.
there is that benefit to it, that
Mhm.
post-traumatic growth,
Yeah.
that concept where it's a weird line to talk. I feel like you really can't comment on that unless you're somebody who has gone through stuff, because
Yeah.
otherwise it just seems like victim
I'm like,
blaming and
"Oh,
like
brr."
sociopathic. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, and, like, I
yeah.
just had a really horrific miscarriage, about 6
Oh
months ago.
man.
So today was supposed to be my due date, um,
Wow.
and it's my 3rd one, and, I mean, I had to give birth to my son, like, dead, by myself in the
Jesus.
bathroom and almost died.
Yeah.
So, I would have never have survived that or be okay right now to talk about that if I hadn't gone through all of these other things and gathered the tools to cope with trauma and really shitty experiences. Like, I'm really good
Yeah.
at dealing, like, with shit, because I would 100% kill myself by now, like 100%. It was so
Yeah.
devastating, but like, it was kind of like, ah, son of a gun. Like, I'm really good at dealing with this stuff now, and I'm grateful for all those things now because it got me through the worst moment in my life, which was 6 months ago. Um,
Yeah.
so it's kinda like this weird bittersweet thing of like, "Man, I'm so grateful, for all
What's
those
that
opportunities to grow."
experience What's that experience like having this super just painful and traumatic experience? I mean, psychologically, emotionally, and physically. Um, but now that you have these tools, I mean, how did you kind of ground yourself and get yourself through that?
Um, like, I'm still not through it, right? Like, I still cry about it.
Oh, of
So
course.
I, like,
Yeah.
cried last
Yeah.
night because I knew it was coming, and,
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to choose to not be a victim, and I've made that choice so many times that now it's just the default. And so I just started blogging everything that I felt because I'm like, cool, I'm not at a place to where I'm gonna go teach like a miscarriage course or anything right now, but I want to make sure to document all this pain and what I'm feeling and what I'm
Yeah.
processing so that when I am able to talk about it in detail, that I'll have so much to give to other women who
Yeah.
are walking through this. So like that's how I automatically think now. When something bad happens, it's like, oh, okay, this is another experience that I can use to help others. Um,
Yeah.
and if you don't think that way, you'll fuck yourself. Like you'll get screwed over by yourself.
It's hard because like I have a similar mindset where I'm just like, okay, what can I learn from this?
Mhm.
How can I benefit from
Yeah,
this in some way?
yeah,
Um, but I've also had some people like my therapist and some of my close friends who, have said, well, that's kind of escapism in a way.
true.
Like, that's kinda like, I'm someone who doesn't like sitting with my emotions in the moment.
Hmm.
Like, I will, in the essence, almost like a strategist, like, I
Yeah.
will sit with my emotions and sit there and journal and be like, "Okay, what am I feeling? How do I deal with this?" But I don't actually emotionally like
Process.
sitting there and processing, and I am very prone. I mean, I'm an addict, like,
Mhm.
I'm a workaholic, and that's my form of addiction,
Same.
and something else. So it's just like that's how I process escapism,
Mhm.
you know? Um,
Yeah, there's
and
definitely that. It's definitely attractive.
yeah, yeah. So it's just, I don't know. I think that's a very healthy way of going about it, but I always question if like
Mhm.
that's if I'm kind of like, convincing myself it's healthy, but
Right.
maybe it's not. I don't
Well,
know.
and
It's hard
I
to
I
know.
asked my therapist, and I'm like, "Listen, I'm scheduling a meltdown every Thursday afternoon." And I'm like, "And I don't know if that's healthy, but, like, it
Yeah,
allows me to get through most of my work, and then it allows me to just, like, let myself explode for a couple hours in a safe environment, and then pull myself back together to finish my week." And he's like,
Yeah.
that's a really productive way of handling that. He's like, but, grief is like a soda that you shake up and you're just sitting there like letting the pressure out little by little
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
might
yeah, yeah.
explode. So
Yeah.
just know that it might explode if you keep doing it
Yeah.
that way. And he's like, and you're prolonging the healing process. And I'm like, yeah, like I get afraid that like I won't be able to put myself back together again if I like fully let go. And like I mean that pain of like losing my child and like holding him and like he fit in my hand. And so like holding him like in my bathroom, like I felt like I was gonna go insane. Like I could feel
Yeah.
myself on the brink of insanity, both like physical and emotional pain. And I'm like, oh, my mind's about to break. Like I'm about to lose my fucking shit, like for good.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And it was like this outer body experience. I'm like, okay, I need to reel myself back in. Like, cause we're pretty close to the edge. And so then I just kind of like walked myself back from that edge. And it was a very
Yeah.
strange experience for
I
sure.
imagine.
And I haven't like
I mean, not
unpacked it
just
completely, but yeah, it was very weird.
I mean, even just emotionally in a vacuum, that's got to be hard. But then also, physiologically, like you've got just so many hormones
Mhm.
and things going
Yeah.
on, and you've
Yeah.
got the trauma response physically. Your adrenal system's got to be. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot,
Yeah.
dude.
And it was weird. Like the postpartum stuff was weird because I didn't think I would
Yeah,
experience that because I mean, my body still had to go through like birthing all this stuff out of
yeah.
me, which almost killed me. But like my mom came over because she's like works for a doctor's office. And so she took my baby and put him in a little thing so that she could take him and have him cremated. Um, and like she left with him and I like freaked out. I'm like, I need him like close to me. Like I need him back like right now. Cause it was so I did not expect to have like that much motherly attachment to him.
Yeah,
So it's really bizarre. And so yeah, now I have like an urn necklace. So that's where his
yeah.
ashes are. And if I don't wear it, I freak out. And I know that's not
Huh.
entirely healthy, so I'm trying to figure out like how to navigate that. Like what does that next step look like? So,
Yeah,
but I feel
yeah,
like I wasn't able to keep my child safe. So this is my way of like keeping him close and keeping safe. And I like freak
yeah,
out if the necklace gets cold. Like if the
yeah,
thing gets cold because his body was cold in my hand. So that like freaks me out. So yeah, I don't know what the next step of healing that looks like. So
yeah.
um
That's. I mean, in a lot of ways, I have to imagine the postpartum d- depression, like, and all the pack. It's. I don't know, but intuitively, like, I have to imagine in the case of a miscarriage, it's probably a lot more severe. Your body doesn't have. It's such a hot and cold
mhm,
situation where your body has, this natural, from an evolutionist perspective. I mean, you body is primed to
yeah,
deal with this process and
yeah,
deal with the process, 9 months and then give or take. And but then just to abruptly cut that off, I mean, yeah,
yeah.
that's gotta throw your body in a weird fucking situation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's been
yeah,
bizarre. And then, I work out all the time because I used fight, so I'm always
yeah.
working out, and so it's just interesting to navigate, like, my hormones now and my emotions and, like, okay, where are my levels at? And, my body's screwed up. So,
Yeah.
obviously, this is my 3rd miscarriage that I know of. So my body's definitely struggling, and I think that comes from all the abuse. And then I was, like, popping Plan B pills like crazy because my trafficker was trying to get me pregnant, and I was trying not to get pregnant.
Oh,
So I'm
shit.
sure that
Yeah,
screwed
yeah,
everything up. And then all the weight
yeah,
cuts for the fights. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, like and so then there's that guilt of, "Oh, I did this to myself, and now I'm paying the consequences." Um, and then the trafficker had children, and so at one point, staying became protecting the children. Um, so I felt insanely guilty for when I left because I left the kids with him and I didn't do anything about the
yeah,
kids. And so I'm like, "Oh, this is the consequence. I didn't take care of the children that were given to me, so now I don't get children." Um, so still working through that too. That's like
Yeah.
really hard
I
for
mean,
me.
I know intellectually you probably acknowledge that's not
Right.
the truth, but still,
Feels
it's a
fucking
son of
true.
a bitch. Yeah,
Especially
yeah.
when have 3 miscarriages in a row. Um, yeah, it feels true. So,
So what was that like? Like once you got in that car accident and you decided that did you decide to leave shortly after, or was that just the catalyst that started the seed?
yeah. No, I left, within that week. So, car accident happened. I'm have this new enlightened view of myself of what the fuck.
Yeah.
I was me being sarcastic. Um, and then he wouldn't take me home. He wouldn't come get me, so I had to text a John, someone, uh, to come pick me up and take me back to my apartment, which I had my own apartment that he paid for. So I went back there, ate a tub of ice cream, and then committed suicide. So I overdosed and
Yeah.
woke up to him pumping my stomach somehow. And this is all really confusing to me. Like, I don't remember much of it, but he's like, I pumped your stomach. And then I went and got my dog. I went and got a puppy because I figured I would kill myself again if I had someone to take care of. Um, and then one of his baby mamas did something, so he had to go somewhere, bought a plane ticket and left. So it was very rapid fire, all within Valentine's week. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was very like sequential, like boom, 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 boom. Okay, gone. And I just left because I knew that I had a very
Yeah.
small window of clarity and that I would get
Yeah.
sucked back in if I didn't act.
Yeah, and I'm sure him not being in town physically
Mhm.
helped
Oh yeah.
because there's that fear of like, what if somehow, he sees me leaving? What if he does this? What if he did that?
Mhm.
Like with him gone, I imagine that at least had to have helped alleviate some anxiety.
Sure, yeah, and when he was up on the res, so, like, up on the mountain, you don't get cell phone service, so I knew, like, he wouldn't be trying to reach me or, be able to track me or anything like that, so I just took advantage of the opportunity and bought a one-way ticket and left. Like, I had 5 years of my life, I just left everything, like, straight up my apartment. I was still working for the church during the day at this time.
Wow.
So I was living that
Yeah.
double life, and I just left everything. Didn't even tell my boss. He's like, "You're in Florida?" I'm like, "Mhm." I quit, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you came back and then that's when you had that conversation with your parents. Like,
Mhm.
so yeah, man, that's so much weight. You go through all that
Yeah.
and you're like, I gotta come clean. And before you can even if you wanted to tell them about everything that happened to you, you started off by just saying, this is where it started,
Mhm.
and they just shut you the fuck down.
Yeah. They believe me about the neighbor.
Jesus.
Um, he still lives in the neighborhood my parents live in. Like, so I see him almost
Dude,
every single time I go there.
oof.
Yeah. Kinda crazy.
Oh,
Um, I will say,
so they they believe
yeah,
they
they
believe he
believe
did
that.
this
Yeah.
and they still live there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
His parents live catty corner to my parents, and then he lives a couple houses down from my parents' house and has a son. So when I drive to my parents, I see him all the time playing like baseball with his kid or whatever. He was a minor too. So for a minor to do that to another minor makes me think
Okay.
that something was going on. He saw that somewhere. He learned that from somewhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not taking away from what he did. Like, what he did was wrong.
Sure. It makes it perhaps a little easier to digest in some ways.
But he was a minor,
Yeah.
and probably something was going down that taught him to do that. So, and
Yeah.
even my sex trafficker, like, he was a full grown ass man. He was raped constantly as a child by the older women in the tribe. He was Native American. So, like, he had 2 choices: become a victim or become the abuser. Those were his 2
Yeah.
choices. In Native culture, they don't do therapy, they don't do any of that kinda stuff. So I'm definitely not, like, giving him an easy pass, either of them, but when you're conditioned and that's your environment and those are your only 2 choices, Yeah, I mean, I would choose to be an abuser or a victim probably if I had the
Yeah.
ability to choose.
It's a difficult thing. I mean, I was talking with a friend about this recently, and we were talking about just, pedophiles, and
Mm,
there's a lot of stories of pedophiles that voluntarily get vasectomies, and they're like, "I'm not gonna have kids, and I don't wanna be around
mm,
kids," and they were abused themselves,
yeah,
and they're disgusted by the fact that they have these impulses, and,
mm,
like, I Jesus Christ, like, that's gotta be hard, man. Like, that's
yeah,
gotta be hard to, like, be self-aware and be like, I don't wanna do I mean, that's so difficult, and I feel really bad for them
mhm,
that somebody like that goes through that, it has all this societal pressure and people
yeah,
looking at them like they are some, crazy abuser, and it's like, no, they didn't ask to
mm,
be abused themselves. They didn't,
yeah,
and it's so difficult, and there's just so much nuance there that I guess,
yeah.
I just feel like doesn't get discussed, and,
There's definitely not
it's
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 not a
hard.
cookie cutter situation, approach, like
Yeah.
nothing, no two cases are ever the same. There's similarities, but like, yeah, you definitely can't say kill all the pedophiles or, like, okay.
Yeah.
But like it's
Yeah.
who when do you take responsibility for that? I mean, if you don't have the
That's a
resources.
fucking that's a weird line, man. It's like, yeah, what this is something with, like, morality.
Mm,
It's like, at what point did your trafficker, at what point did he go from being an abuser to sorry, being abused to being an abuser? Because that is not a hard line.
mm-mm, mm-mm,
It's not a hard line because even if you do it once or twice, it's like that's your conditioning.
mhm,
So at what point would it be like if you could pull back and like a video game
yeah,
objectively say, okay, this is the point when you turned.
yeah,
It's like how do you reverse an entire lifetime of calcified, I mean, like you struggle with that yourself with
yeah,
just all this programming and like he was programmed in the same way. So it's just like
yeah,
Jesus Christ, like it's so easy, I mean, if you told the bullet points of your story to an average person, they'd be like, "That person's fucking, Satan, like, that person's a piece of shit,
yeah,
blah, blah, blah," and it's just like but then you hear and I'm sure he has a lot more depth to his
sure.
story. At what point is there that transition where, like, you probably should have done some self-reflection and known better, but then,
If you were
like,
never
what
taught about self-reflection,
yeah, you don't have the
you
tools,
didn't have any tools.
and yeah, so it's just Jesus Christ, man,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah,
we're
I
in a
definitely don't
weird
say
fucking
that to,
space.
like, protect the abusers at all, and I don't want anyone to
For
think
sure,
that,
yeah.
but there is a lot more to the story. There's always 2 sides,
Yeah,
and we can't ignore the one we don't want to hear,
yeah.
so
So what was your transition from you coming back and having that conversation with your parents? I mean, before we get to the next thing, what was that like? For you to have that conversation, because Jesus Christ, like, I already thought when you first told me, like, I already thought that was fucking heavy, but with all the context
yeah,
of everything you went through and just being like, "I just want support, and I
mhm,
just wanna be heard, I just wanna be understood," and even if maybe intellectually you're like, "They might not give that to me," like, you just like, I got out.
mhm.
I got out, and, like and then just to kinda have that did you tell them about the trafficking?
Not until, like, years after that point.
Okay.
Um,
So you were just holding all that in.
well, and I didn't have the words for it. I thought I was in an abusive relationship. Like, I didn't know, "Oh,
Yeah,
I was being sex trafficked. Oh, I'm being labor trafficked. Oh, he was a trafficker, and these were his girls." Like, years of therapy of because I didn't have context for therapy either. So when I came back, I was raging. I was so angry all the time, and that's a horrible
yeah,
person to be around. Horrible person. So, like, props to my parents for just giving me a room and like
yeah.
trying to be like, "Hey, honey, do you want to go out to dinner today?" I'm like, "Fuck no, like I marry you down." They're like, "Okay," like they were so amazing in
Uh,
that they weren't like, "You're in our house, you have to follow our rules, you have to go to church." They were just like,
yeah,
"Whatever you need, we're here, we love you." And I was like,
Well, that's
okay.
quite a it's quite a 180 from how they were earlier.
Yeah. And they were
Yeah.
drinking and stuff. I'm like, who the hell are you people?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, they definitely, transitioned as well. But um, yeah, so I just had to try to find. I just knew that I had PTSD probably. I knew I had brain trauma, and I knew that I was super angry and was in a really abusive relationship. So I just started Googling all that stuff and like how to heal from an abusive relationship. And basically, I just fell onto like Andy Frisella's podcast and Ed Milet's podcast were like my absolute lifelines. It was the only thing I could basically consume, which are very strong, like alpha male figures in their industries. So it's like that reoccurring theme of that, but they're healthy and they're good and all that good stuff. So they just Andy talks a lot about being an entrepreneur and having mental health and dealing with like heavy depression. Ed Milet always talks about these crazy inspirational stories and overcoming like horrible things. So that worked me into a place to where like, oh, they talked about going to therapy and maybe I should go to therapy. Oh, maybe I should read this book. And so that began my journey. And then like after like 3 months, I thought I was like all healed. And I'm like, I'm gonna go help other women.
Uh,
Like, this will be great.
yeah, yeah.
And
I
so
know that feeling.
I applied to all these like women's shelters. And the one that called me back and fucking hired me was an anti-sex trafficking organization.
Wow.
And so I started working for them, still not connecting my story. And I was the intake counselor. So I would interview all the women coming into the program and determine whether or not they were sex trafficked or not, and whether or not they were fit for a program. And so I'm sitting there like reading these interviews, and I'm like, this sounds really familiar.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, holy shit. Like, I was sex and labor trafficked, like by definition, by the freaking book. And so
Fuck.
I went to my supervisor. I'm like, hey, I need to tell you something. Sat down, told her the whole story. She's like, oh my God. So they sent me to the same therapist they sent all their girls to for free.
Yeah.
They just sent me there. And I would do like 2-3 hour sessions like every week with this guy. And he's one of the best trauma resolution therapists in the country. And yeah, he helped me so much. And he's still my therapist today. Like I still go see him like when I need to clean up.
Yeah, yeah.
So
What were the big takeaways from working with him?
something super interesting is that like our minds can't think in reverse. The only time we've seen rewinds were VCRs in videos. So a technique they do is you'll like say a good memory, a bad memory, and a good memory in detail. And then he'll repeat it back to you in reverse sequence. And he would do that a couple times. And like next thing you know, like it doesn't feel heavy anymore. Like kind of like, huh.
Huh.
And I was like laughing at him, like, you're a fucking idiot. Like you're gonna take like what that
Yeah.
one time I saw a dolphin, pair it next to when I got raped with a rifle, and then put it next to like when I had cotton candy, like, and that's gonna make it all
Yeah.
better. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and like for whatever reason, something happens in your brain where you start detaching the neuron and the emotion, and it takes it from your like front of your brain and puts it into past. So you don't experience it anymore in the present. It's crazy. It's crazy
Interesting.
weird.
Yeah, yeah.
So that, all the grounding techniques, man. The most powerful moment was, that I can remember. Well, I mean, there are many of them, but one time when he told me that just because what happened to me was messed up doesn't mean I have to stay messed up to prove that it
Mm,
was messed up. Like I'm allowed to
yeah.
heal, and that doesn't let him off the hook for what he did to me. And I
Yeah.
was like, "What
Yeah.
the fuck did you just say to me?"
Yeah, yeah.
And that was massive for me if I didn't have to keep perpetuating of like, "Oh, I'm so broken and all this horrible shit happened to me and I'm like fucked up from it because it was so bad." It's like, "No, I get to be fine. I get to be
Yeah.
okay." That was huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's like I've talked about many times, like, some of the shit I've gone through and being suicidal and all that stuff. And I've had one or two people be like, Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's that difficult for you to talk about, like, almost in a way where
Mm.
they're like, maybe it's that you're exaggerating,
Right.
and I'm like, because I've processed it a lot, I've sat with it a
Mm,
lot, I've talked about it a lot,
mhm.
and it doesn't mean it's still not heavy. It's just I'm not tethered to it emotionally
Yeah.
like I used to be, and
Yep.
I'm not talking about it necessarily because I want to. I'm talking about it because I'm trying to help
Others.
maybe spark something in other people.
Yeah.
Same way you're doing
Mhm.
it, you know? I can tell like us talking, like it's still there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's still heavy, but it's not owning you,
Mhm.
you know? Like
Yeah.
and that's very crucial.
That's what Ed Milet always talks about, that your past doesn't define you, but it can serve you. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and, like, I've made it serve me, and I've taken back
Yeah.
its power, and now it works for me. Like, I don't work for
Yeah.
it. Um, so that's super important. Like, it's on my website for
Yeah.
my business. Like, it's the first
That
thing on
was
there because I'm like, I'm just putting it out there, like, "This is what happened, and I'm gonna use that to get me business." Fuck yeah, I am.
yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
that's not,
Yeah.
and
I mean it
people, like, get offended by that, and I'm like, "Excuse me? Like, I earned that fucking story." Like,
yeah.
and now you're telling me I can't profit off of it, or I can't, like, make a brand off of it? Like, fuck you. Like, I'm gonna,
It's also a filter. I
yeah,
mean, if
yeah.
someone's like, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to talk about this. This makes me feel bad, makes me feel weird. I don't want to deal. It's
Yeah.
like then that's not your fucking customer. Like
No.
you're not going to level.
Mhm.
Like it's like that actually was one of the things. Like when I saw your website, I'm like, oh no, I want to talk to her because
Yeah.
I'm just like, if you're gonna be that fucking front bearing about it,
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, we're gonna have a good conversation, you know.
Well, and I
Um,
still have, like, moments of breakdown. Like, I almost canceled today because I was like, I feel heavy as fuck. Like, I've been crying all morning, you
yeah.
know? And it's like, all
Yeah,
right, well, are you gonna let it own you, or are you gonna own it? And I don't know if it's
yeah,
that emotional detachment or that workaholic thing,
yeah.
but, like, it is what it is. And,
The
like,
workaholic thing and it it doesn't help. Like, it's just like, "You should do that thing. You should go ahead and do it. Don't be weak. Go ahead and do it." Like, it's just it's constantly there.
yeah.
Sometimes it pushes me, sometimes it's bad, but I'm lucky to have my partner who, pulls me back,
Mhm.
and it sounds like, it's the same with your husband. It's
Yeah.
like, every once in a while, just be like, "All right, I feel like I should just grind on this
Mhm.
because of this, this, and this." And she's like, "No, actually, that don't. Just go to bed, wake up early, and just do it." I'm like, I
Well,
don't wanna, like it's just
yeah.
I have this romantic idea in my head of I just pull an all nighter.
Mhm.
I'll feel safe. I'll feel fine because then I can go to sleep and I have no worries. And it's
No.
just like, but if I don't do it, I'm gonna stay up all night. I'm gonna worry. It's just like, no, that's just being
Yeah.
unkind to
Well,
yourself,
yeah,
so
and
it takes a
that's been a
while.
huge process in, like, learning to balance my feminine and masculine energy because I'm pretty masculine, I'm pretty intense, I'm very aggressive. I mean, and I'm loud and I'm upfront, and that's just who I am. I lift weights, I punch things, you know. Um, but trying to separate what part of that is a trauma reaction and built from trauma and what is actually me. And then
Yeah,
also creating an energy, getting a little blue on you, creating a little energy and creating a body that can nurture and house a child. That's feminine
yeah,
energy. So that's been an interesting process. And all last year, I was like really leaning into that feminine energy stuff. Um,
what does that look like for you?
I don't know. It's still so hard. Um,
Yeah,
It's so difficult for me. So I have a photo shoot on February 1st, and it's totally like sexy boss babe photo shoot. So it's gonna be like so triggering and awesome. And I know it's gonna
yeah,
be so good for
yeah,
me. Um
yeah,
so that looks like for me, and it seems really like probably seems really materialistic to a lot of people, but that looks for me like getting a pretty outfit, like wearing my push-up bra and wearing my heels and letting my tits, like, show and, like, not see, and I'm already trying
yeah,
to talk myself out of it.
yeah,
Did you see
yeah,
that?
yeah, yep,
And
yep,
owning it and being like, "You're not gonna get raped. You're not gonna go to
yeah,
hell. You're gonna look hot, and you're going to go get a beer with your friend Jessica, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
making very particular choices and decisions like that intentional. I'm trying to exercise at least the outer version of femininity. So maybe some of it will sink in a little bit. And learning to be kinder to myself, like talk nice. Cause I like am on the treadmill, I'm like, you fucking fat bitch, like run faster. Like nobody gives
Yeah.
a fuck what you feel. But maybe I should be
Yeah.
like, hey girl, today's a hard day. It's okay if you slow down a little bit. I got you. Work out 7 days a week.
Yeah.
You're okay, girl. Like,
Yeah.
so that's the hard part for me, but I don't really have a clear answer, I guess, for that.
That's fair. I wouldn't have a clear answer for it either. It's like one of the things that's really helped me, Gabor Mate, he's an addiction specialist. He used to run the addiction center in Vancouver, and highly recommend checking him out. I really think you would like it. He deals tremendous amount about trauma, and he basically says all addiction stems from the exact same source.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if you're a gambling addict, a sex addict, a workaholic like us, or alcoholic. He's like, it all stems from the same thing, and it's all trauma based.
Yeah.
And he talks about one of the coping mechanisms is what would parent Josh say, or what would parent Amanda say
Mhm.
to yourself in this circumstance, like, and think about this benevolent, like, loving, you, the best side of you. What would you say it to your child self right now? Because he's
Yeah.
basically saying that, like, all of us are kind of like
Mhm.
children. We have that child voice that's like, hey, you should do that thing. And it's like fear based. And then you've got that other voice that, you're just talking about. It's just like, hey, girl, you should probably relax. I do that a lot.
Mhm.
And it really helps me because it externalizes
Yeah.
things where it's just like, if you had a son that was in this circumstance right now, like, what would you say? And I would be like, dude, Josh, like, hey, this we're going using the other analogy, it's the other situation. It's like, dude, you don't actually need to get this shit done. Why are you so nervous about this meeting tomorrow?
Mhm.
And it's like, and I'm like, well, Dad, it's because I feel like I didn't get it done enough, and I'm worried that this is gonna happen. And it's just like, all right, does that actually seem likely?
Mhm.
Like, you've known this dude for a long time. uh you've worked together for a long time. Do you actually think that he's going to have a problem with what you're showing him? And you're like, not really. It's like, okay. So if you stay up all fucking night, you're just going to basically be tired, and then you might become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
So why don't you just relax, get some sleep, go get in the sauna, and spend time with your fucking partner, and go chill. And I'm like, fuck. you know
Yeah.
so I don't know, that kind of thing has helped me. And it's odd because it does sound kind of woo like in a way, and it sounds kind of this shit that, like, 5-10 years ago I would have been like, that's fucking
Yep.
bullshit. But it
It
works.
does.
It does work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I try to talk nicer to myself as well. And I like the idea because a lot of times it's hard for me to like love me or be kind to me, but I can be kind to you. I wouldn't make you
Yeah.
work out 7 days a week. I'd be like, no, you need a rest day. Your muscles need to regenerate. It's actually healthier
Yeah.
for you to do that. It's more beneficial for you to do that. And if you get something too late to me, I'm like, oh, it's all right. Life happens. I get it. But if I deliver
Yeah.
something late, you fucking leave, like,
Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
help when you like put yourself outside of you and like, how would your best friend talk
Yeah.
to you? Or how would you talk to a child? I worked in foster care as an anti-sex trafficking specialist. That was my last job for 2 years, and like loving on those kids, like was super healing experience because it's like I got to be the person that my child, the inner child of me needed. And I got to be that
Yeah.
person that saw the signs and like put a stop to them being sex trafficked or them being sexually abused. So that was really insanely difficult, insanely triggering, but really healthy as well to be able to kind of like take that back.
Were there any, like, aha moments when you were working with the kids, with both yourself but also with them, where you feel like you were really able to help them in some sort of meaningful way? I mean, I think it's all meaningful, but is there anything in particular?
Well, yeah, there were two girls that were sisters, And their case was pretty horrific to where they're being like locked in rooms for years and being sex trafficked by
Oh
their
my
father.
God.
And but all the children. So there were like there was 3 girls and 2 boys. And they're all trafficked and raped by their father. Um and so I had all of their cases because it was a sibling unit, and, like, just driving the girls to therapy and kinda just helping them process, like, what they were feeling, and, um, like, one just kept running away, and I had to go into trap houses and pull her out, and every time she saw me, though, every time she saw me, she'd, like, burst into tears and run into my arms, and I was like, I got you, baby girl. Like, no matter how many poor choices you make, no matter how many times you run away, I'm still gonna hug you. I'm still gonna take care of you and still tell you that, I can't tell them that I still told them I love them, like, even though you're not supposed to. Like,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
need to hear those
yeah,
words. And it's like, I love you, girl. I got you. Like, you're never getting rid of me kind of thing. I mean, even to
yeah,
this day, like she has my number. She knows how to find me. So I don't know. It's just that consistency of being able to show up for someone consistently when no one showed up for me consistently. Um, Felt like I was giving that back to myself when I gave it to them. Because being
yeah,
showing up at like pivotal moments is one thing. Fucking cops, 911 shows up in emergency. Anybody can show up in emergency. It's showing up every single day when people aren't as nice, when they're spitting at you, when they're cussing at you, when they're throwing their lunch at you, when you have to chase them down in the middle of the schoolyard.
yeah,
Like those are showing up consistently and consistently showing love to them was a really great thing. Like I felt like I was ministering to myself. So that was
for
pretty
sure.
cool.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, it makes sense because the exact opposite of what you just described is how most abusers are. It's like they will show up when it's a big monumental
Mhm.
thing because that's, the carrot and stick situation, but they're absent. I mean, I know a couple people that have been getting out of pretty abusive relationships either recently or in the process of it. And it's really interesting because they're like, well, I'm just expecting them to, like want me back and this and that and do these grandiose
Mhm.
things and these sweeping gestures. And I'm just like, what makes you think that this person is capable of it? Because if they were, first of all, if they were, you wouldn't be in this circumstance right now.
Mhm.
But if they did, you would have to be suspect that they were just doing it to get you back.
Mhm.
So, either way, you got to get like you acknowledge this is a toxic situation. They're like, yeah, and I'm like, well, why would you want this person
Y
to go after you?
yeah.
And like, I understand why. That's that conditioning, and your self worth is also tied to having that love or that desire, and I get all that, but also it's just like, what is that actually what you want? And
Yeah.
it's difficult.
Well, if you train your brain that that's good or that's love, then that's what you're going to think love is. Like,
Yeah,
when I got in a relationship, when I started dating my husband, it was so boring. It was like I was like, "This is boring as fuck." Like, he's exactly where he says he's gonna be. He does exactly what he says he's gonna do. He shows up every fucking day. He texts me every fucking morning, and, like, I loved it and I hated it at the beginning. I'm like,
yeah,
I was about to break up with him so many times because I'm like, "Ugh, like, this is
yeah.
so boring."
You become a
Addicted.
reliant and
Yeah.
addicted to the
Yeah.
chaos. Yeah.
And it w
No, I mean that's how it was with my first relationship. It was very, very traumatic, very
Mhm.
abusive, and I got out of it, and then over the handful of the next couple relationships that I had, I was like, this is like there's no
Yeah.
drama. Like you kind of like I kind of like the
Yeah.
drama,
Picking
but
little
like
random
do I
fights.
actually Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like it's just I don't know. And
Yeah.
I realized up until truly like until I met my fiance, like I didn't really know what a healthy
Mhm.
relationship was.
Yeah.
I didn't have any role models for
Yeah.
that. My parents had a not great relationship. It wasn't downright abusive or anything, but it certainly wasn't happy, and they got divorced like 7 years ago,
Mhm.
something like that. And, I didn't grow up with any role models of healthy I honestly up until I was an adult, even in the last couple of years, didn't really know people that were married
Hmm.
at all that really had a healthy
Right.
relationship. Maybe they had a functional relationship,
Right.
but it wasn't healthy.
Yeah.
And it's just odd, like, just consider how, as a society, even if you don't have all this trauma,
Yeah.
we just don't have a benchmark for what healthy is. So if
Right.
you're used to all this trauma and shit, like, a healthy relationship just seems
So uncomfortable.
soulless.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
bland. And that's what I mean, I'd be talking to some of the girls while taking them to the safe house and be like, listen, this is gonna be boring as fuck, and it's gonna feel so uncomfortable from the fast life you've been living. It's gonna feel so unnatural, but, like, push through that. Like, wait it out, because when you get to the other side, you realize that basic and boring and vanilla is actually what you've been wanting this whole time. Like, peace feels
yeah,
so uncomfortable, and so I had to, like thank God I had, like, cool mentors in my life that I was like, "I'm breaking up with Gavin," and they're like, "No, you're not."
yeah,
They're
yeah,
like, "Well,
yeah,
let's
yeah.
talk about why you are." I'm like, "'Cause he's" and I'd start describing, and they're like, "So he's consistent, he's nice to you, he buys you gifts, he takes you on dates, he tells you he loves you and you're beautiful all the time, and that's why you wanna break up with him?" I'm like, "Fuck," like, yeah,
Fuck.
and they're like,
Yeah,
"Amanda, this is what you're doing," and so, like, yeah, I'm super grateful for those people being a sounding board in my life because I would have missed out on my soulmate and my best friend, and so, yeah, I
yeah,
got to be, like, a sounding board for a lot of those girls and be like, "It's not gonna feel good. Healthy doesn't feel good all the time."
yeah.
Like, getting on the
No,
Stairmaster sucks every
yeah.
single day. It sucks, does not feel good, but it is healthy and it does create a great ass. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like when I had my business, I was working 100-hour weeks, and
Mm.
I had an ulcer, and I was
Oh
losing
my
my fucking
God.
mind, and I left. Yeah, it was bad, and I left, and then I traveled in the RV for 2 years, and that was kind of me finding myself. Just I had to remove myself
Mhm.
from all the external
Yeah.
influences and just be myself. And then I decided, like, okay, I'm gonna move back to Ohio. I was strongly, being like, hey, my fiance at the time, or my fiance now, but I was like, hey, if you want to move up here with me, go for it. She flew up here for a week and
Wow.
was like, I actually really like it. And she came up, and then the whole plan was, um, I'm just going to live this chill life. I charge enough. I've been doing this long enough where I can charge enough. I
Mhm.
can basically just work part time. It's cost of living is very cheap here. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do my podcast. I'm going to write. Um, I lasted about maybe 4 to 6 weeks, and then I got, like, a big contract, and it was just go.
Yeah.
I started just working all these big projects, go, 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 and it's just because it was just I didn't know how not to,
Mhm.
and, like, having that space felt super
Mhm.
uncomfortable, and, fast forward, 2020, that kinda caused a lot of us to just slow the fuck
Yeah.
down, and ultimately, I'm like, I couldn't travel. Traveling was like kind of my escapism, and then I couldn't. Everything just kind of went down, and I was just like, man, uh, I gotta go back to what I wanted to do. But then I started doing it even,
Yeah.
and late last year, or let's say mid last year, and man, it was really fucking uncomfortable. It still kind of is in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Like
Moments.
I got this kind of chill life, but I'm still like, but like I got to ground myself back, and it's hard, and so I'm a year truly into this process, and I'm still like, it's still like a struggle. So when people are just like, I don't know, like, I'm like a weekend, and I'm like, oh, you sweet summer child, like you have no idea what's ahead of you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you got a long way to
Well,
go.
and it's funny now you can see it like a mile away. And then like other
Oh
people,
yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
oh, I remember when I was
yeah,
there. You got 2 more years in until you have a mental breakdown. And you can almost like
yep,
plan, time everything perfectly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I still
So
struggle with that
you,
escapism and workaholism. But I mean, I use weed. Weed helps me so much to
yeah,
go from like that manic state and slow me down enough to where I can actually think and create that space to like step
hmm,
back. So I mean, that's how I use weed. I don't smoke every day, but
yeah.
it helps me create space.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so you made a good point. Like, you're just like it's still the workaholism. So like you have been, you came back and then you started kind of working with a lot of these, the women's shelters and sex trafficking task force and all these other
Mhm.
things, and you've been doing that. What was the transition into you doing content strategy? Because it makes a lot of sense for me.
Yeah.
Being in marketing, like you grew up not having a voice, and then you had to spend a long time figuring
Mhm.
out why you live and what your voice is and whatever. So you're really good at knowing how to pinpoint that and how to cultivate that.
Mhm.
And so kind of like how you just said, like you can spot it a mile away
Mhm.
now in other people
Yeah.
when it terms to like this. Like you can spot it with businesses, you can spot it with people. Like I'm the same way. Like for sure. So it's like, what was that transition like for you? It seems like for me, it seems like a pretty natural transition, but I think for most people it wouldn't. They
Yeah.
would be like, "What the
It's, like,
fuck?"
super
Yeah,
affirming for you to say, like, you get that because everyone's like, "Well, how
yeah,
did you go from social work and your lifestyle to being a" and I'm like, how do you not see the
yeah,
connection? So,
yeah.
like, I love that
No,
you
totally,
understand that. Uh, well, yeah, like, when you work for any nonprofit, you wear, like, 20 different hats.
for sure.
So
Yeah.
while I'm working for these I always wrote, even when I was in the cult. Like, I'm looking at my bookshelf, and I have hundreds of journals. Literally, from when I was, like, 6 years old all the way up to
Oh
current.
wow. Oh man, that's got to be fucking weird to go back
Oh,
and
yeah,
read. I
and
mean,
it's
I
dark
only
shit.
have. Yeah, I when I was moving last year, I came across a box of old shit that I hadn't looked at. Like it's just one of
It's
those
weird.
boxes that like when I went in the RV, I put it in storage and then I came back
Yeah,
and I just didn't even open
yeah,
it. And then I came across like my journal from the year that I was in that abusive relationship and I'm like, "Oh my
yep.
God, dude. How did you
Such a
not see
train
this
wreck.
coming a mile away?" Oh, I was a mess.
Yeah.
Oh, but here's the thing, I also was really self-aware in some
Mhm.
ways, and that's what made it even
Yeah,
harder, where, like, I saw the
yep,
signs. So, like, it was inaccurate. I did see it
right.
coming, but I had total misconceptions on what would happen in certain ways, how I don't know. It was weird,
Mhm.
like, it was really weird. I was eerily accurate, but also horribly off base, and it was just confusing
Yeah.
because my mental story in my head of how it all went very inaccurate,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I gotta imagine you looking back 6-year-old you like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's gotta be
It's like a
weird."
little I can see it right now. It's a little fuzzy journal. Like, it's actually, like, fuzzy,
Yeah,
and it's got purple
yeah.
flowers on it. Gosh. Anyways, I almost, like, burned them. I almost, like, threw them out or burned them because I was like,
What kept you from not doing it?
the thing that keeps me talking about all this shit too is, like, someday that's gonna help somebody, or it's good to
Sure,
look back
sure.
and go, "Hey, you've come a long way." Like, be nice to
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I
That
wrote
would be it.
that entire time. So even though I didn't
Yeah,
have a voice, I was still like practicing somewhat of a voice. So by the time I was doing anti-sex trafficking work, I'm writing case notes, I'm writing emails, and everybody's like, "Holy shit! Like you're a fantastic writer! Like these case notes, like I can clearly understand like the situation and everything happening and why you think this and all this stuff." So I started writing like all the emails and all the VIP funder emails and our collateral. And next thing you know, I'm writing curriculum for schools and I wrote federal legislation, um, and like all their social media posts and stuff like that. So when I quit, it was totally normal for me to just continue writing and creating. And everyone was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like nobody was shocked that I
yeah,
turned into a freelance writer and then built, this content agency. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, to me, the trajectory
Yeah.
seems pretty clear. So, what was it like freelancing? Because what a lot of people, and now even more so having this agency, like what a lot of people don't understand is like you very much so when you're starting a business,
Mhm.
you're basically going out into the wilderness, man. Like it's fight or flight,
Yeah.
it's fucking survival, it's feast and famine. And I don't know about you, but it triggers me a lot. and I grew up in small business. Like my dad has a tree service. I grew up in small business. I've had an actual, job for total maybe like 5, 6 months or something. Eh, I've always just done my own
Mm,
thing. I'm always freelance, and I had an agency, and then I've been consulting. So the my point is I'm really experienced with it
okay.
and
Yeah.
conditioned. Yet it's still a struggle because being an entrepreneur is the highs, the
Oh, yeah.
workaholism is amazing. It totally enables all of my manic and like escapist
Mhm.
needs, but also the lows. It completely embellishes all of my triggers and a lot of my mental health issues.
Yeah.
So it can make you outwardly very successful, but inwardly it can be very, very
Oh,
heavy.
yeah.
Um,
She's a cruel
so
mistress.
like yeah. So, like, what was that process for you? Like, did you deal with any of those kind of just growing pains or
Yeah.
what?
Ray, I'm fucking
Yeah?
in the middle of it. Um,
Yeah?
yeah, so, freelancer, like all the imposter syndrome, all that. Do I really know what I'm doing? Do I really know what I'm saying? Can I really charge that much? And then it's like, well, fuck that motherfucker. Like, you gotta pay me more. So it
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
definitely feed into all your mental health issues. Like, I've been diagnosed with massive depression, anxiety, PTSD, and bipolar. So it was
Yeah.
like all my little demons could run free. Um, I just learned my patterns, though. I think that was really important for me to understand the waves of my emotions, of my hormones, what I needed to feel safe, what I needed to feel to create. That Thursday meltdown is on my calendar. Like, and whether or not it's a meltdown or not, like 8 times out of 10, it's not a meltdown. 8 times out of 10,
Yeah.
it's me doing some self-care stuff and checking in with myself. But the fact that I've created that space and figured out that that's when I need to create space for myself, um, I found that I have to be insanely disciplined in order to be
Mhm.
productive. So I get up at 4:30. I go to the gym for an hour and a half every single fucking day. I have a meal plan I follow. I have at usually, well, not today, but usually I go out at 12:30. I'm looking at my calendar. I do bow practice. I shoot my bow and arrow, and then I have lunch at 1. And then I have a hard stop at 5. Um, do I always follow that? No, but I try
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And yeah, 100%. It's definitely when you start a business, you are going to learn so much more about yourself than anything else I feel like in the world. Like running a business and being faced with success is scarier than being faced with failure or abuse or defeat. Like
Yeah. It's
the potential is
you
terrifying and liberating at the same time.
yeah. And you can't rely on anybody
Mm-mm.
else,
No, it's just you.
you know?
Yeah.
It's just you.
Shit.
Yeah. And it's fucking hard, dude. Like there's some people that I know that are have ventured or venturing into freelancing or being an
Hmm.
entrepreneur, and like I'm like, dude, there's this kind of romantic view of being a freelancer, and I'm like, I don't know if you're gonna enjoy it. It's
Yeah.
not even like you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's not even
Totally.
that you can't do it. It's like I don't think you're going to enjoy
Right.
it. For me, like the juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
Like I'm very neurotic, and I like having
Mhm.
control. Control and safety are the two biggest things for me.
Mm.
So I get really nervous. Like I've had a couple times where I've had a client that basically accounted for pretty much all my income or
Yeah.
very close to income.
That's
And
scary.
I don't like
Yeah, I
that.
don't
I
like that
get
either.
very nervous. I get very nervous.
Yeah.
So now it's like I try to make it so that at the very most, like each client maybe accounts for like a third of my income,
Mm.
because then I don't have to worry that much about like the rug being pulled out from under me,
That's limiting yourself
because
though
that
too.
fucking happens.
That's like
Huh?
a subtle form of self-sabotage though too. Like what if one of them came to you and was like, I'm gonna pay you 100K to be my fractional CMO? Like, and that was like, would you
It's a
say no to that?
yeah, uh,
I would be scared.
I've been in that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
circumstance, like, pretty much that exact circumstance, and it didn't really go super
Oh,
well.
no.
Not because of the results of working with
Okay.
them, but just because what happened is that you put all being a fractional CMO or anything like it, you're short term in
Yeah.
nature,
Yeah, yeah.
right? You spend a lot of fucking time working on that specific
Mhm.
thing. And then what happens, at least what happened to me and some other people that I know, is that you're going to get a lot of people that are going to want to work with you while you're doing
Mhm.
that. And you're like, I don't have the bandwidth for this right now for the next six
Yeah.
months. And then you're what happens is you're not building up your
Sure.
pipeline. And then when you do need to make that transition, you're not sure if you're going to renew
Yeah.
that or
Yeah.
not. And then you get into that part where if you don't renew it, then, as you know, even if you have 4 or 5 irons in the fire, any or none of them could go through. And so, like, what I realized is I was spending so much time on one individual
Mm.
project, I wasn't continuing to put myself out there, and I wasn't continuing to try and build new
Yeah.
relationships because it just took so much of my
Yeah.
bandwidth. So, I worry about that. Like, I don't really like doing that. I wouldn't completely discount it in the future, but
Mm.
particularly where I'm going with, like, my life, like, I don't think that's a good fit.
Well, and some people really love being a fantastic, highly paid freelancer, like expert. Like to me, I couldn't say no. Like I couldn't say no to
Yeah.
money. So I like worked myself into a spot to where I was like saying yes to like 3 different fractional CMO positions that at the same time. I was like, oh my God, like I'm working like 16 hours. And so then that's when the agency happened. It's like, well, I need to hire some people and I need to outsource and
Yeah.
trade. And so I just started hiring people and offloading projects or having people start stuff for me and then I finish it. Um, and that's worked amazingly. Like my business quadrupled in like the past like month and a half because I started doing that. And
Wow.
like I'm good. Like I have time to do a 3 hour sit down with you. Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not worried about it because all my people are working and doing stuff for me. And I'm gonna have stuff by the end of this conversation to review and send off. And
yeah.
edit and whatnot. And I keep those VIP clients, like those are mine. I touch those and I touch everything before it goes out. Um, obviously. But having those people and like making that decision of, okay, am I cool with just being a freelancer, which is like you can make a ton of money, be very successful, be super happy with like being that, or do I want to scale this thing? And I decided I wanted to scale it. Jesus Christ. I thought being a freelancer was hard. Now, like communicating to
Way
other
worse.
people
Oh, yeah.
and like trying to get them to get it and somebody told me you can't hold people to your expectations, but you can hold them to a checklist. And I was like,
Yeah.
SOPs all day long. everyone,
Yep.
everyone gets a checklist for every fucking thing. Um,
Like fucking Oprah with the checklist, like,
dude, that's how I am,
yeah.
and it's been just a new level of leading myself and now leading others has like escalated that whole growth and um, yeah, all the self awareness.
What's been the biggest struggle? What's been the biggest struggle? Because it sounds like this transition's super fucking
It's
recent.
yeah, it's like within a month or so. It's been hell.
Fuck, man, you doing that and you've been processing all this other shit? I mean, oof.
That's there comes that escapism and like I have to
Yeah,
things
yeah,
have to be
yeah.
hard in order for me to thrive.
Yeah.
So I'm like looking at that because I don't know if I want that to be true in my life. Um, but yeah, I just started hiring people and like not holding on to my money as much. So like I hired 3 new writers, a video person, a graphics person. I hired a bookkeeper. I hired a project manager. Um, and it became a question of, do I just want to like do this for me or do I want to help other people? And I love the idea of giving other people an opportunity to provide for themselves, for their family, and also like get good mental health because like get a good therapist because I'm paying them enough to get a good therapist because I'm paying them enough
Yeah.
to go to marriage counseling because I'm paying them enough so they can afford fertility treatments. Like that gets me really excited to build something that's supporting family units and health and wellness for multiple people. That gets me pumped.
Yeah, it's a hard balance running an agency because you're just like you got to have enough clients,
Yep.
and again, like you can't be too reliant on,
Hmm.
individual clients, particularly if you're running an agency and you got cash
Yeah.
flow, like you got
Yep.
payroll. You just can't. You got payroll. You can't fucking have too many whales clients. It just but then at the same time you can't have too many
Yeah.
because then you're too spread thin. And then, like, you're juggling with how many people do you need because you need it's just fucking it's a
It's
lot, man.
terrifying.
Yeah.
But, that monthly
Yeah,
recurring revenue is super important. So,
for
we
sure,
like
yeah.
our social media packages, super easy to sell, super easy, super affordable. And so we have our system down. So like I've got that basically covers the majority of our expenses. And then I'm out generating those with ads and conversations, and then also generating these big other like copywriting, ghostwriting things, and then the fractional CMO stuff. So that's all going in there as well. So basically, the recurring
Yeah,
revenue keeps us afloat if all else failed. And then this other stuff's like cream on top. That's where all the
bonus.
bonuses
Yeah,
come
yeah,
from.
yeah.
That's where all the,
Yeah,
good
yeah.
stuff comes from. So I just get to sell all day and I ghostwrite a lot. And then I'm like in a lot of meetings, obviously, with people in their businesses discussing their brand. So
Well, it sounds like you're pushing yourself, but there's also that kind of Obi-Wan Force ghost, like kind of standing over you, being
yeah.
like, "Oh, but don't do too much,"
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're approaching it with the right mindset. A lot of people in your circumstance, I would be like, you might want to throw because there's actually a couple people I know that are in the process of scaling their businesses, and I'm very strongly kind of being like the person, like the little angel on the shoulder, being like, you might not want to do that
Yeah.
because I think that the way that you are is not really congruent to that kind of
Hmm.
lifestyle. I don't get that vibe with you though.
Yeah. Well,
So
thanks. That's good. Let's
yeah,
call me.
it's um uh
I mean,
yeah,
and
if you
we're
ever
doing
if
we've got a meeting to do IVF on the 20th. So
yeah.
I'm gonna have a bunch of hormones surging inside of me pretty
Oh
soon.
shit.
So
Yeah.
yeah, just making sure my team is solid and strong. Yeah. So using all that social work experience to make sure everybody's okay, including myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Um I guess kind of like wrapping things up is how do you feel like all of this has influenced your worldview? I know it's a heavy question, but that's one of the things that I've been asking in one way, shape, or form. Most of the people I've had on the podcast, where it's like people have these very different life
Mm.
experiences, but it really colors how you view the world.
Yeah.
Um, is it? Go ahead.
First off, like the world isn't fair. Nothing's fair. Fair is a
Yeah,
strange
yeah,
concept that somebody unfortunately imagined up and created and put into people's minds. Does not fucking
yeah,
exist. Does not. You reap what you sow, period. And it doesn't matter if you intentionally sow it or subconsciously sow it, you're gonna reap it. Um, I probably have a little bit more like hardcore, like, "Ugh," like world
yeah.
mentality. It
Very David Goggins kind of thing.
sure, and it's subject to change,
Yeah,
right? And I think that's something that's missing is that a lot of people like, I poured myself into my certain beliefs in different seasons in life and then had them completely flip-flopped, turned upside the fuck down, multiple times. And the things that have remained intact in the midst of that is, like, that God is love, and I still believe, like, God is good despite, like, losing my baby, despite rapes, despite everything. Like, that's the one anchor that holds me. Um, and like you reap what you sow, I think taking extreme ownership is vitally important to your happiness and success in life. Because if you don't take ownership of your current life and your current reality, then you can never find like true success and happiness because you can't control it and you can't create it. But if I take extreme ownership of like where I'm at right now, whether or not it technically is mine to own, then I empower myself to do something with it, whether it's change it or keep perpetuating it. Um, I don't know if that answers your question, but Yeah. I think there's a lot more good in the world than people think. I think
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I I I'm very fascinated by the giant ass marketing campaign happening across the world. I'm like, God damn, this is fucking brilliant. I'm like taking notes. Um,
yeah,
so that's like super interesting to me. And I'm very aware of how differently I think than other people. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong or like I'm enlightened or anything. I'm just aware of how extremely different I view the world and the majority of humankind, which is
what would be the if you had to kind of like bullet point it, what do you think the main differences are?
I'm just that I'm like, this is gonna sound really weird, that I'm insanely
Go for it.
powerful.
Yeah,
Like that extreme ownership thing, it's like I'm 100% responsible and I'm 100% powerful and capable of creating whatever the fuck I want. As far as future goes,
yeah,
money's the easiest thing in the world to make. And people would probably cuss me out for even saying that. Like, but it's so fucking easy. And so if that's easy and
yeah,
that's energy, then I can literally create whatever the hell I want. And
yeah,
it's weird to me that people don't realize that. And it's weird to me that people so easily surrender their power over their life and over their situations with fucking excuses. Like that pisses me off,
yeah,
not because I'm like, oh, they're lazy. Pisses me off because it's like you have so much potential to be great and to do great things. And you count yourself out. And that like really bums me out for you.
yeah. Yeah, there's so many people that I know, and I'm like, you could be beautiful, it's like you get, it's like they have so much fucking
Mhm.
potential, but they just don't want to take the first step.
Yeah, it's crazy to me.
And yeah, I know it's the same. It's the same for
And
me. Like I get it. I understand what is going
right.
on. I get it intellectually, but I'm just like, man, just fucking take the first step.
Mhm.
Like you're gonna realize the water ain't that
Yeah.
cold. And even if it is cold, heat shock proteins, bitch. Like, it'll do, you'll get something out of it. So I don't
Yeah.
know. Is there anything that you feel like we should have covered that we didn't?
No, I think we covered it all.
Well, fuck yeah.
Go
So
to therapy.
how can
That's my go to fucking therapy. Your life is your responsibility. No matter what happened to you, you're responsible right now for your life and who you are. It's not your mom's fault. It's not president's fault. It's not fucking whoever your dog's fault. Like you are responsible. Take ownership and do what you got to do to live a life worth living and having. That's my speech.
fuck
Thanks for
yeah,
coming to
that's a
my
great
TED
place
talk.
to land on. How can people follow you from here?
I like live on Instagram, so Amanda Catarzi
Yeah.
is my handle on there. Seriously, DM me. Like I live there.
Hell yeah. All righty. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. This is a fucking pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.